Chapter 45:45. As expected by Xiaohua, although he only used the time it took to finish a meal, behind him, on the ghost plains, there were several flashes of light and shadow. The screams could no longer be heard. Xiaohua also didn't know how many of the hundreds and thousands of monster clan and human clan would be able to make it through the ghost plains alive. Left and right, under several gusts of wind, he finally saw a huge platform. It wasn't until his body landed on the platform powerlessly that he was able to release his divine sense again. His mind could also sense the space around him. Only then did his heart completely relax. This Xiao has finally passed through the ghost plains. Damn it, this ghost plains is really the ghost plains. Xiaohua muttered to himself as he sat down on the platform, which was a rare sight. He looked at the grayish-white plains. Right at this moment, another light and shadow appeared in the distance. Xiaohua didn't even think about it and opened his delusion breaker eyes. He really wanted to see what exactly those restrictions that seemed to be everywhere were. Unfortunately, Xiaohua was ultimately disappointed. He saw that the ghost plains was the same as before, still covered in layers of fine lines. The so-called light and shadow was extremely far away from him, so how could he see it clearly? The light and shadow disappeared, and he also didn't see any restrictions. Forget it. Xiaohua was helpless. Just as he was about to close his delusion breaker eyes, suddenly, the entire platform shook greatly. Xiaohua very naturally looked towards the source of the tremors. Wherever his delusion breaker eyes passed, Xiaohua's heart was even more shocked than the platform, because through the fine lines, he saw a huge pillar of golden light stop on the platform in the distance, then immediately disappeared. This? Xiaohua opened his mouth wide and cried out in disbelief. Could it be that the restrictions on the ghost plains are mobile, and they're not simply placed on the plains? However, in the next instant, another inconceivable thought appeared in his mind. Or, on this ghost plains, there are ancient divine beasts that are even more powerful than the strange beasts in the strange beast pens? They were in another space and could move freely within Star Moon Palace. Could they easily kill everything in this space? Of course, there was another possibility. The golden pillar I saw just now was the body of a divine beast. This divine beast was too huge. It didn't know that there were humans and demons from the 3 continents in this space. It was just that when it was moving, it bumped into the humans and demons in this space, because its law of space could pass through the layers of time. It accidentally bumped into these demons who had the strength of a sun devourer? Damn it, this is impossible. In the end, Xiaohua was too embarrassed to think too much about it, because what he thought was truly unimaginable. Even he didn't dare to believe it. Then, Xiaohua opened his transcendence vision and looked behind the platform where the golden pillar had disappeared. Behind the platform, there was naturally a blank space. Only the abnormally dense fine lines could be seen, and nothing else could be seen. After closing his delirium eyes, Xiaohua powerlessly sat back down on the platform. He stared blankly at the distant sky that shone through the darkness. What's after this platform? I wonder if that's a pillar-shaped restriction, or where the pillar-shaped divine beast went. Is that the end of the divine restriction? Perhaps the real Star Moon Palace is behind this platform? Xiaohua's strange thoughts popped up one after another. His curiosity was like a wild grass that was popping up randomly. However, Xiaohua was also clear in his heart that he definitely couldn't go beyond the platform. If there was such a powerful restriction or divine beast before the platform, then what about after the platform? He really didn't dare to believe that he would still have a chance to survive after going deep into the platform. After resting for a short while, there were no more flickers of light on the ghost plains. After that, more greater demons from the demonic beast race arrived one after another. These greater demons were clearly frightened by the light, and when they saw Xiaohua, they were still in a state of shock. After the great demons bowed slightly, they also scattered and went to different places. After the great demons, there were also some humans who flew over. These humans were all pale and scared out of their wits. The human cultivators were naturally different from the great demons. When they saw Xiaohua, they were very respectful. They all stood on the platform and quietly listened to Xiaohua's instructions. Xiaohua stood up, looked around, and asked, "Are there any more human cultivators behind?" "We don't know." A tall general dressed in battle armor said, "We were arranged to be in the second group." When the restriction was triggered, the entire plain was filled with hurricanes. We and the surrounding humans were all blown away. Yes, we also didn't know why we came here. Another master dressed in Confucian robes echoed. Xiaohua lowered his head and looked at his right hand. The arrow and light that disappeared in the ghost plains appeared again, and the distance between the arrow and the light was very close. The direction the arrow pointed to was the same as the platform Xiaohua was on, and it was the opposite of where the light and shadow shook. Xiaohua thought for a while and asked, "Where are you going now?" "I'll let you know." The general said respectfully, "According to the seniors who entered the Star Moon Palace earlier, this place is the deepest part of the Star Moon Palace. Behind this platform is the abyss of the void. We can't go any further. In the past, there were great demons who didn't believe it and went in to investigate. However, no one who went in has ever returned alive. Instead, to the left of this platform is the resplendent sea of stars. It's where our opportunity lies. We can find any starry sky to comprehend. We're going to take a look at the starry sky over there." At this point, the general pointed to the place where the light and shadow shook, and a trace of hope appeared on his pale face. Seeing the general's expression, and then looking at the other cultivators, they all had the same expression. Even the great Yao, who had left after bowing earlier, also harbored the same longing as them. Xiaohua couldn't help but sigh. He recalled Zhu Qing's words at the star-plucking tower in the Copper Pillar Nation. Everyone's opportunities are different. There are Confucian cultivators who comprehend the heavenly heart and become literary stars. There are also demon kings who comprehend the heavenly heart and become great saints. Of course, there are also Taoist seniors who break through the void and ascend. Yes, fellow immortal Xiao, believe it or not. According to the records of my Star Moon Palace, among the few who entered the Star Moon Palace, there were indeed many who obtained the opportunity to ascend to the heavens and became the most powerful figures in the 3 continents. Presumably, the different opportunities Zhu Qing spoke of were the opportunities in the starry sky near this platform. It was no wonder that these humans and demons gave up on the opportunities in the fallen Star Palace and risked their lives to cross the ghost plains. Their purpose was to comprehend the starry sky that could allow them to reach the heavens in a single step. Looking at the many cultivators of the human race who had high aspirations, what could Xiaohua say? It was not good to have excessive ambition, but ambition was also the motivation for cultivation and the support for advancement. Xiaohua could not blame them for anything other than encouraging them. Therefore, Xiaohua raised his finger and pointed to the place the general was going and reminded him, "According to what I know, there are more restrictions there. Just now, I even saw a flash of light. If you want to go there, you have to be careful." "Yes, thank you for the reminder, Senior." The general nodded and asked again, "Then where does Senior want to go?" "Haha, I want to go there." Xiaohua pointed to another place and smiled. "That is where the Star-Picking Tower's disciples are going. I have an appointment with the master of the Star Moon Palace." "That's great." A few Confucian cultivators smiled. "Then we will follow behind Senior. I believe the master of the Star-Picking Tower will not mind." Instead, the general and some Confucian cultivators hesitated and bowed. "We will not follow Senior. You can go by yourselves. Be careful." Xiaohua nodded and said, "Actually, the Star Moon Palace is full of danger. It is better to believe in yourself than to believe in others. It is better to rely on yourself than to rely on others." Previously, on the Ghost Plains, this old man was also powerless. Seeing Xiaohua speak so sincerely, the human cultivators were all moved. After all, they were disciples of various aristocratic families, and there was no lack of opportunities to get close to the literary sage, or even the literary star. In their eyes, the supreme cultivators of the human race were all abnormally dignified. Not to mention a word, even a glance would not fall on them. How could they meet such an amiable and approachable person? Everyone looked at each other, and no one dared to say anything. Because they came from different aristocratic families, they did not dare to trust each other too much. However, in their hearts, they all had a plan. Everyone bowed and saluted, and then those who should leave hurriedly left, while those who stayed behind stood respectfully at the side. The respect at this time was naturally different from before. It was from the heart and superfluous on the surface. After waiting for a while, Xiaohua recalled that Chen Cheng and the others had already said that it was impossible to pass through the ghost plains by relying on the magical powers of the human race and the demon race alone. It was only possible with the help of the hurricanes produced by triggering the restrictions. Now, there was no light shadow, which meant that the restrictions had not been triggered. Naturally, there would not be any human race and the demon race coming. So Xiaohua stood up and said, "Let's go." "Yes, Senior." Everyone answered and followed behind Xiaohua. There were restrictions on the platform that Xiaohua could not sense. Previously, when he came over from the Ghost Plains, he saw a huge, starry sky, but when he landed on the platform, the starry sky disappeared again. After Xiaohua flew for a while, many light shadows appeared in front of him. These light shadows appeared and disappeared and were somewhat vague. However, when Xiaohua's gaze fell on the light shadows, it felt as if his gaze was drawn into them. When Xiaohua flew for another 1,000 feet, a huge, starry sky actually covered the top of his head without any obstruction. Is this the resplendent sea of stars? Xiaohua's figure stopped for a moment, and he lowered his head to look at his right hand. The arrow on his right hand was still pointing forward, and it did not stop. Xiaohua was just about to move when a Confucian cultivator behind him said respectfully, "Senior, this junior intends to comprehend the mystery of the starry sky here." "Good. I hope your wish will come true." Xiaohua nodded. After that Confucian cultivator saluted, he rushed into the starry sky and disappeared in a moment. Chapter 45-46. Then, Xiaohua continued to fly forward. Although he felt that he had flown very far, the starry sky above his head seemed to have never changed. If Xiaohua didn't know that he had been flying all this time, he would have suspected that he had been imprisoned in a certain place. Just as Xiaohua was about to search for Suji and the others, something flashed in front of his eyes. It was as if there were some halos flashing by. Xiaohua's heart skipped a beat. He stopped and looked up, only to see that the starry sky was different from before. Not only was it different, the strange scene in front of his eyes made Xiaohua stupefied again. In front of Xiaohua's eyes, different pieces of starry sky had miraculously appeared on the horizon. The starry sky that Xiaohua had passed by earlier had already disappeared and turned into a small piece of starry sky, hanging at the edge of this different starry sky. Adjacent to this piece of starry sky was a faint, fuzzy halo. This halo seemed to be the boundary of the starry sky, separating the different pieces of starry sky. Although the starry sky in each piece of starry sky was bright, the brilliance that flashed was different, and the rhythm of the flashing was also different. In particular, one didn't need to distinguish them. As long as one's gaze swept across these pieces of starry sky, a feeling would emerge from the bottom of one's heart, letting one know that each piece of starry sky was different. Damn it! Xiaohua looked at this amazing, resplendent, and vast starry sky and finally understood the origin of the resplendent sea of stars. He couldn't help but sigh and say, "This is the real work of an ancient, almighty expert." Presumably, each starry sky is the starry sky of a certain realm. So many starry skies. I wonder how many realms' starry skies are there. It should be Feng Wu who came here. The starry sky he attracted in the Great Sage Hall was only the starry sky of the 3 continents. Now that he is here, he can see the starry sky of various realms. If he can attract the starry sky of these realms, then what kind of miracle would that be? While sighing, Xiaohua's right hand began to shake. The arrowhead and the light dot had already merged. After the brilliance dissipated, the astrolabe appeared in Xiaohua's hand again. Without waiting for Xiaohua to raise his hand, the astrolabe transformed into a shooting star and flew towards one of the countless stars in the starry sky. Immediately after, a boundless consciousness swept over. Suji's calm voice transmitted over, "Xiaohua, you're here?" A strange expression appeared on Xiaohua's face. He nodded and replied, "Yes, Senior. Junior has finally arrived at the resplendent sea of stars. Come over and we'll talk." Suji sensed the strangeness in Xiaohua's tone and didn't explain. Xiao Hua looked at the human cultivators on the left and said, "Everyone, this old man is going to look for Master Xingyu. You all can go and comprehend by yourselves. It seems that there is no danger here. As long as you control your cultivation speed, don't be too greedy, and don't go too deep into the starry sky, you will be able to reap some benefits." Yes, I understand. Numerous cultivators were eager to give it a try when they saw the true faces of the numerous starry skies. At this moment, they listened to Xiao Hua's instructions and saluted respectfully before each of them found a different starry sky and soared into the sky. Xiao Hua wasn't in a hurry to find Suji. Instead, he released his divine sense to investigate. However, when his divine sense approached these pieces of space, he discovered something strange. Although each piece of the starry sky didn't look very big, the place where one's spiritual force landed was actually no different from a real starry sky. Spiritual force had a tendency to sink into it very easily. Xiao Hua's spiritual force didn't dare to get too close. Since he couldn't get too close, he couldn't carefully explore every piece of the starry sky. Xiao Hua's plan to find the three continents, the ruins, or the great desolation continent's starry sky from these thousands of starry skies was shattered again. Moreover, every time Xiao Hua's spiritual force swept past a dozen pieces of starry sky, one or two pieces of starry sky would appear that he couldn't get close to them. It was as if there was a layer of restriction sealing the starry sky. Since his exploration was fruitless, Xiao Hua gave up and urged his figure to fly towards the place where Su Ji's spiritual force swept past. At this moment, the starry sky was different from the previous one. The starry sky above the horizon was like a curtain of stars. It wasn't as vast as the previous starry sky. In just half a meal's time, Xiao Hua had flown over 1,000 pieces of starry sky and already saw Su Ji and the others stopped in midair. At this moment, Su Ji's body was completely enveloped in a faint silver brilliance. Outside the brilliance, there was something like a chain that tightly bound him from top to bottom. Even so, some immortal's coercion that ordinary cultivators couldn't resist still seeped out of the chain and surged in all directions like waves. Next to Su Ji was Fairy Xingyu. Her body was also suffused with mottled silver light, similar to Su Ji's. Their faces were covered by the silver light, so no one could see them clearly. In front of the two immortals, in a place extremely far away, thousands of human clan cultivators were arranged in a strange formation. They were facing a dozen pieces of starry sky and were waiting for battle. "You're finally here." Fairy Xingyu turned her head to look at Xiao Hua, her tone unusually cold. "I thought you wouldn't come again." Xiao Hua was already a little angry. Seeing Fairy Xingyu like this, his tone also turned cold. "It's not that I didn't want to come. It's because I encountered too many dangers in Star Moon Palace that I didn't know about. I'm even inferior to those Confucian great grandmasters and the great demons of the demon clan. The exotic beast pin, the Fubo mountain range, the lost star palace, the ghost plane, oh, and this resplendent star sea. I've never heard of such wonderful names. If I hadn't been lucky, I wouldn't have been killed by the exotic beasts in the exotic beast pin or killed by the restriction of the ghost plane. How could I have lingered at death's door and arrived here? I've made it clear to you. As long as you pass through the transmission channel, immediately activate the star disk. We will wait for you outside the exotic beast pin and bring you here." Fairy Xingyu said faintly. "These so-called dangers are not dangers at all. But you didn't activate the star disk at all. How could we find you? It was you who wanted to take risks in these places. What does it have to do with us? You brought this upon yourself. Are you going to blame us for it? Is this the senseless risk you mentioned?" Xiao Hua smiled coldly and pointed to the thousands of disciples who were on guard in the distance. "I remember that when we came in from outside the Star Moon Palace, there were tens of thousands of disciples. How many are left now? That's none of your business." Fairy Xingyu replied. "Before they came in, I already told them that I can't guarantee their safety. But I can guarantee that if they survive, not only will they be rewarded by Star Picking Tower, but they will also be able to improve their cultivation." "Xiao Hua," Su Ji spoke. "You don't have to blame Xingyue. This was a matter of mutual consent. If they weren't willing, Xingyue would never force them. As for you, alas, it's my fault. Xingyue wanted to tell you about the dangers in the Star Moon Palace in detail, but I was afraid that you wouldn't come, so I hid it from you. In fact, on the other hand, I never thought that the dangers you mentioned earlier would pose any threat to a Mahayana realm human. The most dangerous one is the ghost plane. I also think that it can't be compared to the heaven prison at all. You were lucky enough to come out of the heaven prison. The ghost plane is just a piece of cake. At this point, Suji raised his eyes to look at the dozen or so stars on the left. Although he couldn't see the expression on his face, Xiaohua could still feel the deep regret in Suji's tone. Since you feel that everything we have done is unfair to you, you can give up. We won't force you. Suji, Fairy Xingyu was shocked. Are you crazy? At this point, how can you say this? In your current situation, how can you wait until the next opening of the Star Moon Palace? Xingyue, do you still remember the agreement you and I made when you formed the Star Moon Palace? Thank you for all forms of support. Chapter 45-48. At this point, Suji seemed to have thought of something. He looked at Xiaohua and said, by the way, speaking of the three forbids, Xiaohua, if you have time in the future, go to the Bronze Pillar Nation. No, it's not the Bronze Pillar Nation anymore. It's the Jade Rock Nation, right? Go to the Seven Suns Temple there, and take a look at your Dao sect bloodsteel. Seven Suns Temple? Xiaohua was stunned and asked, what's wrong with the Dao sect bloodsteel? You'll know when you see it. Suji didn't want to say more. He only replied, I've already said the three forbids. What else do you need me to say? All right. Xiaohua was speechless. He then looked around and asked, Senior, you've been waiting for a long time, right? After all, he had spent a lot of time in other places. Yes. Suji nodded. I've waited longer than before. Xiaohua hesitated and said, you didn't miss it because you were delayed when you came in, right? Fairy Xingyu spat. Don't jinx it. Can't you say something nice? Haha. Xiaohua looked around and asked again, what's beyond this starry sky? What is it? Senior, have you seen it? If it were you, would you dare to go? Fairy Xingyu asked. Of course I wouldn't. Xiaohua answered with a smile. But Senior, you're an immortal. No matter what, you're braver than me. Our strength is limited because of our physical bodies, so we don't dare to go too deep into the Star Moon Palace. Suji replied, the places you've been to are the places we've been to on our third and fourth trips. From the fifth time onwards, we've basically followed the original route and directly looked for this starry sky. As for what's beyond the starry sky and the platform, we don't know. Of course, as far as I know, many demons have gone to the platform, but none of them have ever returned. Oh, the killing thunder is on the other side of the starry sky. It seems to lead to the platform. With your cultivation, you should be able to get a little closer. If you're lucky and don't encounter the thunder, you should be able to see the secret behind the platform. Curiosity killed the cat. Fairy Xingyu reminded him, you're already a Mahayana realm cultivator. As long as you cultivate steadily, you'll be able to ascend to the celestial realm sooner or later. I suggest that you don't explore it. Boom. At this moment, the entire starry sky seemed to tremble. A powerful aura of the immortal realm emerged from somewhere in the starry sky like a gale and crashed down. Not to mention the thousands of cultivators in the sky who were on guard. Even Xiaohua's body trembled and his knees almost buckled. On the other hand, the silver light around Suji and Fairy Xingyue suddenly flourished, and their figures also expanded by several feet. Fortunately, the aura of the celestial realm was like a gust of wind. After it blew, the power of the stars and moons appeared in the starry sky, forcefully washing away the aura. The deterrent force gradually disappeared. However, even so, the thousands of cultivators were still paralyzed in the air, unable to move for a long time. That starry sky. As soon as the aura of the celestial realm disappeared, Suji raised his hand and pointed to the farthest starry sky. As he spoke, his figure flashed and he rushed to the starry sky. Fairy Xingyu was not in a hurry. She flew to the front of the cultivators and waved her hand. Thousands of starlight rays appeared from her hand and fell between the cultivators' eyebrows. In a moment, these cultivators all stood up in the air. Disciples, it's that starry sky. Fairy Xingyu raised her voice and said, you can enter the starry sky with your own perception of the starry sky. If you can find the door to the starry sky, you will naturally appear from the starry sky. Even if you can't find the door to the starry sky, you don't have to worry. When the Star Moon Palace closes, you will still be pushed out of the starry sky by the Star Moon Palace. Moreover, whether you can find the door to the starry sky or not, the comprehension in this starry sky will definitely be of great help to your cultivation. Yes, we understand. The cultivators answered excitedly because what Fairy Xingyu said was true. The cultivators who had entered this starry sky to search for the door, whether they succeeded or not, had gained a lot in their cultivation. Okay, disciples, follow me in. Fairy Xingyu did not dare to delay too much. After she finished speaking, her figure turned into a silver-white starlight and rushed into the starry sky, disappearing in a moment. The thousands of disciples also flew over from various places and entered the starry sky. Xiaohua flew to Suji's side. Under the pressure of the silver light, Xiaohua could not get too close. He looked at Suji's figure, which was several times taller than him, and said in a low voice, Senior, let's go in too. Xiaohua. Suji did not move. Instead, he said in a low voice, do you understand what I said earlier? I hope you don't hate me. Of course not. Xiaohua said with a smile, this is my temper. When I have some grievances, I want to say them out loud. In fact, if I say them out loud, I will forget about them. That's for the best. Suji nodded. In the future, you will understand. Xiaohua was a little surprised. However, before he could ask again, Suji's figure flashed and disappeared. Xiaohua was stunned again. He suddenly came to a realization. Didn't the Star Moon Palace have timelines? Wouldn't Suji's teleportation break through the law of time? Xiaohua wanted to open his Dharma Eye to take a look, but he had used his Dharma Eye too much today. Xiaohua did not know if there would be a starry sky maze in a while, so he gave up on the idea and used his escape technique to rush into the starry sky. The feeling was similar to the last time he flew into the starry sky. When he first started to fly, the starry sky was far away. However, he did not know when, but the brilliant starry sky had quietly covered the sky above Xiaohua's head completely. In this strange starry sky, every star was so bright. Each star exuded an inexplicably powerful power of the stars and the moon. Moreover, there was a huge star halo at the edge of each starry sky. It was like a starburst fluctuation overflowing the entire starry sky. Along with this fluctuation, the star halo swayed slightly like a silk handkerchief. Strands of immortal qi, which Xiaohua was already familiar with, came crashing down from this fluctuation. Although there was not much immortal qi, it was enough to make thousands of cultivators bow down. These cultivators activated their divine abilities one by one. As they tried their best to resist, they formed a certain Dharma array. Fairy Xingyu was standing on this Dharma array. When she saw Suji and Xiaohua enter the starry sky, she raised her hand and took out her star shuttle again. Puff! A mouthful of immortal qi fell, and the entire star shuttle exploded again, turning into thousands of star fragments that fell on the Dharma array. Please, everyone. Fairy Xingyu took a deep breath and said. Hearing Fairy Xingyu being so polite, the cultivators of the human clan said in unison, we understand. We will definitely do our best to serve Senior. Go. Fairy Xingyu issued an order. Thousands of star fragments soared into the sky and landed in various parts of the starry sky. The thousands of disciples also flew into the starry sky, following the star fragments into the starry sky and disappearing once again. After the cultivators left, Fairy Xingyu flew in front of Suji. She glanced at him but did not say anything. Just like Suji, she looked up at the bright starry sky and the star fragments that were still shining brightly in the starry sky. After a long while, the star fragments disappeared. Not a single cultivator appeared in the starry sky. Xiaohua knew that the two of them were a little nervous. He asked in a low voice, Senior, is this the starry sky of the immortal world? If I'm not mistaken, it should be a part of the starry sky of the immortal world. Suji replied, the immortal world is almost boundless and the starry sky is huge. I'm not sure where this starry sky is. Do you know, Xingyu? Of course I know, Fairy Xingyu replied. But don't worry, I won't tell you. It's up to you. Xiao Hua said with a smile. When I go to the immortal world in the future, I'll find it myself. After a while, there were still no star fragments. Suji, Fairy Xingyu, and Xiao Hua were a little anxious, let alone time. Xiao Hua thought for a moment and asked again, Senior, when I passed by some starry skies earlier, many of them could not be entered by divine thought. Is there a passage to the immortal world? The starry skies that cannot be entered by divine thought require special means. What the naked eye can see is just an illusion array. Suji replied, As for whether there is a passage to the immortal world, I don't know. However, Xingyu and I have checked many starry skies that can be entered by divine thought. There is no passage that we are looking for. Oh, I remember now. Xiaohua thought of something again. He waved his hand and took out the Kunlun mirror. As the light vibrated, he took out the black box he had obtained from the Heaven Prison and the black box he had just obtained from the Lost Star Palace. He asked, Senior, I just obtained 2 things in the Lost Star Palace. Can you help me take a look at them? Why are you so nosy? Fairy Xingyu was a little impatient. Oh, let me take a look. Suji was not surprised. He raised his hand and the 2 boxes fell into his hands. Swish, swish, swish. As soon as the 2 boxes fell into Suji's silver hands, layers of thumb-sized inscriptions appeared. These inscriptions rushed toward the silver light crazily, and a sound like a surging sand tide was heard. Celestial Imperial Equipment? Fairy Xingyu was stunned and asked curiously, There is a Celestial Imperial Equipment of Confucian cultivators in the Lost Star Palace? How come I haven't seen it even though I've been there several times? Xiao Hua shrugged and curled his lips, saying, I'm lucky. There's nothing I can do about it. Hee. Fairy Xingyu snorted and said, It's not until today that I know what it means to be shameless. I'll try, Suji said as he scanned the box with his mind. However, I'm not sure if I can break this thing. It doesn't matter, Xiao Hua said with a smile. It's just something I picked up. Senior, please feel free to try. Suji raised his hand and threw the 2 boxes out. Then, he raised both hands at the same time. Kacha, kacha. Amidst the sound of thunder, Suji's 2 arms turned into 2 silver thunderbolts. Woo woo. At the same time, a hurricane appeared in the whole space. The scattered celestial chi fell into the thunderbolts. Suji, Fairy Xingyu was shocked. How can you activate the celestial chi? Do you want to die? Suji did not answer Fairy Xingyu. Instead, he moved his body and the silver light around him began to flow rapidly. Kacha, kacha. The chains that bound the silver light made a rough sound. Boom. The 2 silver lights rushed out of the chains and fell into the thunderbolts. At the same time, the thunderbolts condensed thousands of feet of lightning in the nearby space. P.S. Fellow cultivators who like this book, please come to the starting point to vote, recommend, collect, and reward. Thank you for all your support. Chapter 45-49. Kacha, kacha. As Suji waved his hands, 2 thunderbolts fell on the box. The inscriptions that had calmed down and turned into nothingness surged out again. However, as soon as the inscriptions appeared, they were immediately split in half by the thunderbolts. Woo-woo. Bursts of space roared around the box. Circles of whirlpools gushed out from the void and rushed into the box. The inscriptions on the armor fell from the box like dead tadpoles. Then, the fist-sized box made a rumbling sound and began to expand. In a moment, it turned into a coffin that was more than 100 feet in size. As for the box Xiao Huada had left behind in the Fallen Star Palace, after cutting off a layer of restrictions, it had turned into a black ruler that was 1 foot long and 2 fingers wide. Xiao Hua was a little stunned. He thought that the box from the Heaven Prison would contain something extremely magical, but he really did not expect it to be a coffin. The coffin was pitch black, and it was unknown what material it was made of. The 8 edges of the coffin were engraved with 8 lifelike dragons that sealed the entire coffin tightly. Looking at the front and back of the coffin, there was a ferocious-looking dragon head and a ferocious-looking dragon tail. 9 dragons' coffin? Seeing the dragon scales made of inexplicable inscriptions and the tadpole-shaped clouds between the 9 dragons, even Suji and Fairy Xingyu could not help but exclaim, how could the 9 dragons' coffin appear in the 3 continents? Xiaohua felt guilty and hurriedly asked, Senior, 9 dragons' coffin, what is this? 9 dragons' coffin. It's an item of the heavenly court. After thinking for a moment, Fairy Xingyu replied, it's usually used to hold corpses. Of course, most of the time. It's also a secret item to hold the heavenly court's book immortals. As for what's inside, it's not something we can know. Seniors, you can't open it? Xiaohua was a little disappointed. Yes. Suji nodded and said, the 9 dragons' coffin suppression can only be opened by earth immortals of the heavenly court. Moreover, one must have the special skills of the heavenly court's book immortals. I'm afraid we can't open it. Immortal Emperor Go-chun can't open it? Xiaohua asked. Of course. In this realm, the highest level of cultivation is at the 9th grade of essence energy. How can it be opened? Fairy Xingyu nodded. After a while, she smiled again and said, by the way, if you are lucky enough to find that book immortal, there may be a way. Kiske. Xiaohua waved his hand and said with a face full of disdain, why would I make myself unhappy for no reason? Then, Xiaohua pointed at the black ruler and asked, what about this? Fairy Xingyu waved her hand and took the black ruler. After examining it for a while, she handed it to Suji and said, this thing is a little strange. I can't tell what it is. What about you? Suji raised his hand and received the black ruler. After looking at it for a moment, he similarly shook his head and passed the black ruler to Xiaohua, saying, I also can't discern the origin of this item. If he was not wrong, it should be an ancient divine item. You're fated to obtain it, so take care of yourself. All right. Xiaohua helplessly put the black ruler and the 9 dragons' coffin suppression into his space and said with a wry smile, it seems that I can only wait until I have the chance. The things in the Star Moon Palace are all extraordinary. Since you're fated to obtain them, you should cherish them. Don't underestimate them. Suji exhorted again. Yes, I understand. Xiaohua hurriedly agreed. However, the treasures in his space were too precious. How could he take care of them one by one? Fairy Xingyu looked at the still starry sky and said in a low voice, Suji, until now, no cultivator has revealed their star shatterer. I'm afraid we won't be able to find anything today. Not necessarily, Suji replied. His tone was naturally filled with disappointment. Senior. Xiaohua's heart skipped a beat and he said, you said before that if this starry sky is sealed by divine sense, then what the naked eye sees is an illusion array. If this starry sky is not sealed by divine sense, then what the naked eye sees is real, right? You also said that you need cultivators who are very sensitive to the power of the stars and the moon to find the passage to the immortal realm in this starry sky. Could it be that this starry sky is also an illusion array? This starry sky is a starry sky maze. Suji replied, the passage to the immortal realm is inside the maze? Alas, yes. Fairy Xingyu also sighed and said, the whole starry sky is a big array. Every time we come here, it changes. We have broken through it several times. Only the first time we were lucky enough to see the door of the passage. The other times, we didn't even see the door. As for the first time, Suji continued, we were not prepared enough and Xingyue couldn't cooperate with me, so we couldn't open the door. A huge starry sky maze? Xiaohua squinted and looked at the stars in the sky. He was eager to try. Xiaohua was born with a sense of direction in the void and had broken through many void mazes. However, this was the first time he had seen such a huge starry sky maze. Seeing such a mysterious star array, he couldn't help but say in a low voice, Seniors, if you trust me, please follow me. Oh, right. Fairy Xingyu suddenly realized. Xiaohua, you were also a cultivator who passed the selection of Xingyue. Now that your strength has skyrocketed, I have forgotten about this. You take the lead. Suji replied. Xingyue and I will follow behind. You don't have to feel burdened. Even if we don't succeed this time, there will be a next time. Suji's words were clearly meant to comfort him. Xiao Hua understood that Suji's divination skills had already predicted that this would be the last time the Star Moon Palace would be opened. With Suji's injuries, he would not be able to find a suitable body for the time being. How would he be able to last until the next opening of the Star Moon Palace? Therefore, Xiao Hua urged his body to fly toward the starry sky without saying a word. As the starry sky approached, Xiao Hua's gaze fell on it. Boom! There was a huge tremor and a roar in Xiao Hua's mind. The whole starry sky was huge. Now, with the roar, it expanded again. It was almost vast. Xiao Hua could barely see the whole starry sky with his naked eye. No wonder Fairy Xing you wanted to find thousands of cultivators. Xiao Hua thought to himself. An ordinary cultivator can't search the whole starry sky. They can only find thousands of cultivators, and each of them can take a piece. But if each of them takes a piece, won't these cultivators become a huge mountain that can't see? How can they find the passage to the star array? I guess Fairy Xing you had no choice but to come up with this plan. Xiao Hua looked at the starry sky without blinking. His eyes were also full of stars. These stars rotated and changed with his eyes. After a while, Xiao Hua's eyes lit up. He waved his hand and said, "Senior, please come with me." Fairy Xing you could hardly believe her ears when she heard Xiao Hua's confidence. She hurriedly moved and landed behind Xiao Hua. Suji followed beside her at a moderate pace. In the starry sky and the void, Xiao Hua's confidence was self-evident. In Xiao Hua's eyes, such a vast starry sky maze was like a dharma array with ease. He flew leisurely in the starry sky without any hesitation or thought. Although they had flown for an hour and the entire starry sky still looked like a starry sky, Suji and Fairy Xingyu were ecstatic. This was because the immortal spirit qi was getting denser and denser. In the end, when Xiao Hua rushed toward a star and was about to stop, Fairy Xingyu said ecstatically, that's right, it's here. I came here with Suji for the first time. We just have to turn right." Wait. Before Fairy Xingyu could finish speaking, Xiao Hua hurriedly stopped her. "Senior, you have to fly backward now." Why do we have to fly backward? Fairy Xingyu was really puzzled. "Yes," Xiao Hua said resolutely. "We have to fly backward. Don't ask me how I know. Senior, just follow me." As he spoke, he flew forward a few feet, stopped, and flew backward without looking back. After flying for a few feet, before he could get close to Suji, he saw the space around him distort strangely. Xiao Hua's figure fell into this distorted space. Good. Even someone as calm as Suji could not help but clap his hands. Fairy Xingyu was also dumbfounded. She shook her head helplessly and could only praise, "Amazing, amazing." Chapter 45-50. Quick. Xiao Hua also hugged his hands in the air like a Tai Chi pushing hands. A huge 9 heavens divine thunder condensed and hung above the Yin fish. Break! Suji glanced at Xiao Hua and roared. The thunder in his hand turned into a sharp sword and pierced the young fish. Xiao Hua was not slow either. Almost at the same time, he also pierced the 9 heavens divine thunder into the Yin fish. Boom! The yin-yang fish shook. The entire starry sky shook, and all the stars emitted brilliant starlight. "Stop!" Suji shouted again. The silver light around him shone brightly, and the dragon-like thunder poured into the young fish. "Fall!" Xiao Hua roared. The 9 heavens divine thunder, which was not inferior to Suji's, also surged into the yin fish. Crack, crack, crack. Another obscure sound was heard. The huge yin-yang fish indeed showed signs of stopping. However, just as a look of joy appeared on Fairy Xingyu's face, crack! With a crisp sound, the 9 heavens divine thunder activated by Xiao Hua broke out of thin air. The power of the backlash hit Xiao Hua's chest like a big hand. Xiao Hua could not maintain his figure. With a boom, he rushed into the sky. Fairy Xingyu was shocked. Her figure swayed and landed beside Xiao Hua. She raised her hand to support him and looked at Xiao Hua's face again. "Senior." Xiao Hua smiled bitterly. "Your power of thunder is too overbearing. I can't match it. Therefore, the yin-yang fish can't be balanced and can't stop at all. This is the least amount of force needed to stop the yin-yang fish. Suji was not surprised. He said faintly, "Why don't I try to reduce the force again?" "Okay," Xiaohua responded. The two of them activated the power of thunder again. Sure enough, their forces were balanced this time. The yin-yang fish showed signs of stopping. However, it was just a trend. It did not really stop. The two of them had no choice but to stop and look at each other. This is a dilemma. Xiaohua frowned. If you use too much force, I can't cooperate. If you use too little force, the yin-yang fish can't stop. What should we do? Why don't I try again? Fairy Xingyu looked at Suji and said, "My power of the stars and moon is more feminine. It can complement your power of thunder. Let's try it." Suji said helplessly, "The power of the stars and moon is too soft. It can't restrain the power of the stars in the yin-yang fish. I'm afraid that my lightning power alone won't be able to stop the yin-yang fish." "Don't be impatient." Xiaohua's heart stirred as he asked, "Senior, is there also a difference between yin and yang in the power of thunder?" "Of course." Suji nodded and said, "The power of lightning is not only divided into yin and yang, it is also divided into heavenly stem and earthly branch, and it is also divided into the 5 elements, such as Gongxin metal lightning, Jia Yi wood lightning, Bingding fire lightning, Wuji earth lightning, etc. These are all recorded in Senior's unstoppable thunderbolt." Xiaohua interrupted Suji's words and asked, Yes." Suji replied. Then, Xiaohua raised his hand, activating the dark underworld devil lightning as he asked, "Is this considered soft lightning?" Ah, Suji was shocked. This is the dark nether devil lightning? You. Senior doesn't need to care about the lightning power. Senior only needs to say whether or not it can be used. Xiaohua's expression didn't change as he asked, not giving Suji a chance to ask more questions. "Of course." Suji replied meaningfully. "Let's try again." Xiaohua flew onto the yin fish again. Boom! Suji and Xiaohua attacked again at the same time. The yin-yang fish finally began to slow down as it trembled. Good. Fairy Xingyu stopped being surprised and couldn't help but be secretly happy. However, at this moment, boom! The dark underworld devil lightning in Xiaohua's hand was cut into several pieces again. Xiaohua's figure was not sent flying this time. Instead, he was dispirited on the spot, the brilliance around his body dimming. "Xiaohua." Fairy Xingyu was also moved and called out with concern. Just as she was about to fly over, Xiaohua stood up stubbornly and said in a hoarse voice, "I understand, Senior. Although it is a balance of yin and yang, the power of my yin thunder is too weak and can't match Senior's yang." "Yes." Suji's voice was also moved. He whispered, "So your injury is more serious than last time. Forget it." Fairy Xingyu looked at the immortal qi in the yin-yang fish that was about to disappear and said, "Xiaohua, don't try again. You can cultivate for another 1,000 years. Let's wait for the next time." "No need." Xiaohua raised his hand and covered his chest. He activated the 5 qis unification technique and said, "I know how to cooperate with Senior. Your dermic powers are insufficient. This is the fundamental problem." Fairy Xingyu shook her head and said, "It can't be forced." "Senior." Xiaohua ignored Fairy Xingyu and flew up. He said to Suji, "Are you ready?" "Yes." Suji was really moved. He nodded and didn't say anything to dissuade him. At this time, only men understood men's hearts. Women had to step aside. "Rise." Xiaohua closed his eyes slightly and raised his hand to slap the top of his head. Boom! The 5 qis righteous thunder, 9 heavens divine thunder, 3 corpses in thunder, and dark underworld devil lightning were unleashed at the same time. A 4-colored hand made a trembling sound and fell toward the yin fish. When the power of life and death from the 4-colored hand fell, all the stars in the yin fish immediately dimmed. This. Even Suji was dumbfounded, let alone Fairy Xingyu. He stuttered a few words, and then came to his senses. He hurriedly activated the power of thunder and landed on the yang fish. Woo woo woo. There was a sound that sounded like the wailing of ghosts and the howling of wolves. The entire starry sky shook. The yin-yang fish, which had been rotating since ancient times, slowly stopped and gradually became still. The moment it stopped, the entire starry sky dimmed, and all the halos of the stars turned into still whirlpools. Open! Su Ji and Xiao Hua looked at each other and roared at the same time. As the two of them activated their immortal chi and dermic powers, boom, the entire starry sky shone brightly. Countless whirlpools rotated in reverse, and the yin-yang fish also rotated in reverse. In just the moment of the reversal boom, Xiaohua's figure was sent flying again. Countless space fragments flashed around him. Streaks of thick blood marks appeared silently and strangely on his body. Whoosh! At the same time that Xiaohua was sent flying by the backlash, the yin-yang fish opened up like a rainstorm. A water-like silver light gushed out from inside. Fairy Xingyu was overjoyed. However, she did not rush in. Instead, she raised her hand and supported Xiaohua's falling figure. Her right hand wrapped around Xiaohua's waist, and they flew into the yin-yang fish that had opened up. When they entered the yin-yang fish, Fairy Xingyu's left hand took out an item from her waist and stuffed it into Xiaohua's arms. She whispered in his ear, "Humph, seeing how you put in so much effort, Zhai Xinglu and Moon Embracing Palace will benefit you." Seeing that Fairy Xingyu had finally given him Xingyu, Xiaohua was overjoyed. However, how could he be happy at this time? He had used all his dermic powers to help Su Ji forcefully reverse the yin-yang fish and break the starry sky restriction with the help of the four-colored thunderbolt. However, all his dermic powers could not match Su Ji's thunderbolt power. He had only relied on the Tao of life and death in the four-colored thunderbolt to catch up with Su Ji in terms of realm and dermic powers and barely reverse the yin-yang fish. Xiaohua could handle it with ease if he fought with others. However, compared to Su Ji's immortal spirit power, it was impossible for him to retract and release it freely. The moment the yin-yang fish was broken, he would immediately suffer a backlash from his dermic powers. Although he was not seriously injured, it was difficult for him to move for a while. Senior, Xiaohua used the 5 Qis unifications technique to repair his internal organs and Taoist cultivation methods to condense his nascent soul. He opened his mouth again, but he didn't send a voice transmission. He merely mouthed, "Aren't you afraid that Senior Su will be jealous of us being so intimate?" Humph. Fairy Xingyu pursed her lips and sent a voice transmission. "In terms of lifespan, I can be your aunt for many generations. What is there to be jealous about?" See. Fairy Xingyu had sent a voice transmission to Xiaohua, but when she took Xiaohua through the yin-yang fish and saw the strange scene in the starry sky, she couldn't help but scream again. However, the starry sky behind the yin-yang fish was different from before. The stars in the starry sky were no longer bright stars. Instead, they were huge spheres. Some of the spheres were like blazing fireballs, emitting light. Some of the spheres were like water mist and ice chips. Some of the spheres had rings formed from huge amounts of crushed stones. Some of the planets had 2 or 3 small spheres revolving around them. Most of the spheres were suspended in the air by themselves, without any light or shadow. It was not the dazzling starlight that Xiaohua had seen with his naked eye. In the vast and boundless starry sky, another irregular crack appeared in an area of tens of thousands of miles. Silver light poured out from this crack, and celestial spiritual energy rushed out like a heavenly river. It endlessly landed in this part of the starry sky, and wherever the silver light passed, it formed a pillar of light. At the bottom of the light column was an iron-green planet. The planet had been penetrated by the light column, and many cracks had appeared on the edge of the planet. The immortal spirit chi had covered tens of thousands of miles of space. Compared to the space in other places, this space had obviously collapsed. When the brilliance of the light ball shone on it, it was extremely distorted. This is not the passage to the immortal realm. Fairy Xingyu was surprised and shouted again. "This is a crack in the immortal realm?" "That's right." Su Jizao flew in and understood with a sweep of his mind. He said calmly, "This should be a crack that appeared on the surface of the immortal realm when the Star Moon Palace appeared. However, even if it is a crack, you can still return to the immortal realm through this crack. Xingyue, hurry up. The crack is really shrinking. If we don't speed up, when the crack disappears, our efforts will be in vain. P.S. Fellow cultivators who like this book, please come to the starting point to vote, recommend, collect, and reward. Thank you for all your support. Chapter 45-51. Okay. Fairy Xingyu replied. She released her hand and placed Xiaohua in the air. She glanced at Xiaohua and said, Xiaohua, the light pillar of the immortal realm is in front of you. You can't get close without an immortal spiritual body. Thank you for your help. Su Ji and I will wait for you in the immortal realm. Xiaohua nodded with a smile and replied, Don't say anything. Let's go quickly. When I ascend to the immortal realm, I will immediately find you and Senior Su. It's a deal. Fairy Xingyu knew that time was of the essence, so she didn't say anything more. She nodded at Xiaohua and flew to Su Ji. Let's go. Su Ji hesitated for a moment and also moved. At this time, Fairy Xingyu didn't have to worry about anything. The silver light around her shone brightly, and an oppressive pressure appeared. Her figure swayed, and she fell into the silver light in the distance. Su Ji also let out a long roar. His figure flashed and appeared at the edge of the silver light. Fairy Xingyu fell into the silver light, and her figure began to slowly expand. The silver light around her merged with the light pillar, and Princess Baihua's body was revealed again. Princess Baihua was still beautiful, but her body was riddled with holes. As the silver light fell, her flesh and blood were cut off piece by piece, turning into wisps of green smoke. A light cluster of thousands of feet in size gradually emerged in the light pillar. In the light cluster, a silver mark was particularly eye-catching. The mark absorbed the immortal spiritual qi and shone brightly. An incomparably mysterious outline of a body gradually emerged. Xiaohua, thank you very much. Fairy Xingyu's voice sounded like thunder. Su Ji, let's go. See you in the immortal realm. Xiaohua smiled and urged his magic power to resist the pressure of the immortal realm. He raised his hand and gestured. But at this moment, Su Ji's faint voice sounded. Xingyu, you can go by yourself. I won't go back to the immortal realm with you. Ah? Not only was Xiaohua shocked, but Fairy Xingyu was also stunned on the spot. The light around her flickered incessantly. Why? Why don't you go back to the immortal realm? Fairy Xingyu looked at the slowly closing crack and hurriedly asked, You and I have been busy for so many years. Now that we have finally reached the edge of the immortal world, why don't you go back? Xingyu. Su Ji opened his mouth, his tone as calm as ever. When I saved you back then, I was already heavily injured because I fought with the Heavenly Court's Book Immortal. Why hasn't he recovered after so many years? How is this possible? Fairy Xingyu shouted. You did take a blow for me, but how could that injury not be healed? You haven't said anything for so many years. Have you recovered? I was lying to you. I didn't want you to worry. Su Ji said, that demonized Book Immortal was very powerful. He directly injured my soul and touched my immortal mark. You should know that immortal mark. How can it be repaired in the lower realm? All these years, I've been searching for spiritual items that can mend the immortal mark. I did the same in the heavenly sanctum. But this kind of spiritual item doesn't exist in the 3 continents. It's hard to find even in the celestial world. So, even if I'm in the Pillar of Light now, it'll be difficult for me to return to the immortal dimension. How? How is this possible? You're not lying to me, are you? Fairy Xingyu was dumbfounded and murmured. Fairy Xingyu was dumbfounded. Xiaohua was even more dumbfounded. He didn't understand, but he knew. Because Su Ji was injured, he couldn't return to the celestial world even if there was a passageway to it. In order to let Fairy Xingyu return with peace of mind, he had been hiding this news. In an instant, Xiaohua thought of many things. Many things from before seemed to be clear to him. He couldn't help but look at Fairy Xingyu, who was covered in silver light. Like Xiaohua, Fairy Xingyu's previous details had already emerged in her mind. Because Su Ji couldn't return, he gave his inheritance and the inheritance of Qingqiu Mountain to Xiaohua without holding anything back. Even when entering the Xingyue Palace, Su Ji activated the immortal qi at all costs to stimulate the formation of the starry passage. Even when he found the corpses of the two celestial masters in the Yiqiong heavenly mansion, Suji didn't take any of them and let Fairy Xingyu keep them. On the one hand, it was because he was protecting Xingyu and wanted to give all the credit to her. On the other hand, he couldn't return to the celestial world, so he could only let Xingyu take these things away. At this time, Fairy Xingyu also remembered that Suji had also been looking for something in the Yiqiong heavenly mansion. Fairy Xingyu didn't understand at the time, but now she realized that Suji was looking for healing elixirs. Although Suji knew that it was just an extravagant hope, he still didn't want to give up. Thinking of this, Fairy Xingyu recalled all kinds of things. When they were in the hidden, immortal continent, Suji was indifferent to her and deliberately created a barrier between them. He even kept his distance in the flower realm. It wasn't that Suji didn't want to chat with her, but that he didn't want her to fall too deep. Some of the words at that time were Suji's farewell words. Although Suji really wanted to harden his heart, he couldn't in the end. His words were ambiguous. At that time, Fairy Xingyu was unhappy and didn't quite understand. Now, she understood Suji's painstaking efforts. When she thought of how Suji risked his life to fight the immortal beast in the Yiqiong heavenly mansion, Fairy Xingyu couldn't help but tremble. Fairy Xingyu shouted, "Suji, how can you do this to me?" Hearing Fairy Xingyu's cries, Suji couldn't help but feel heartbroken. A hero's breath was short and love was long. The feelings that had accompanied him for so many years turned into tenderness at this moment. Gotcha! With a burst of cracking sounds, the chains that had previously bound the silver light broke inch by inch. Suji's figure also turned into 1,000 feet in size. However, after the silver light disappeared, Suji's body, which was only left with white bones, was revealed. This body was melting at an extremely fast speed. However, after the white bones disappeared, the silver spots that should have been eye-catching in the light cluster that Suji had transformed into were now dim and even mottled. When the immortal chi fell, the whole spots were trembling. At the same time, Suji's silvery outline gradually sank in the silver light pillar. He couldn't fly up at all like Fairy Xingyu. Seeing Suji's immortal mark like this, how could Fairy Xingyu not know that Suji was telling the truth? She flew down and hugged Suji's entire body. Her sobs reverberated through the entire starry sky like rain. "Suji, you really deserve to die. How could you make me fall in love with you so much? And you abandoned me just like that. You let me return to the immortal world alone. Even if the immortal world has a long life and endless years, how can those years be spent with you by my side?" Fairy Xingyu's cultivation was obviously no match for Suji. Suji's falling silhouette dragged her down slowly. Suji said emotionally, "Xingyu, since it's love, it doesn't matter how long it is. I'm already satisfied that I can accompany you for so many days. You still have a long way to go, and you have a lot of cultivation to go. You'd better go back quickly." "No way," Fairy Xingyu cried. "I'd rather not return to the immortal world to be with you." "What nonsense," Suji replied. "If you don't return to the immortal world, how can I recover from my injuries? If you don't return to the immortal world, who will come back to pick me up in the future? Besides, I've found a way to enter the Star Moon Palace this time. The next time the Star Moon Palace appears, Xiaohua and I will come in again." "Didn't you say that this is the last time the Star Moon Palace opens? Your divination skills have never been wrong." Fairy Xingyu didn't give up, as if she didn't believe Suji's words. Suji hurriedly replied, "How can the divination skills be accurate? That day, I divined that Xiaohua would be my help in returning to the immortal world. But my immortal mark has been damaged. How can I return? So, how can the so-called last time be taken seriously? The Star Moon Palace had existed for God knows how many years since ancient times. How could it not appear just like that? Besides, if you can find the holy lotus seed of the Buddha fruit, you can also come in through this crack. You'd better go quickly. The crack of the immortal world is about to close. If you can't leave, I can't go back either." Holy lotus seed. Xiaohua's heart skipped a beat when he heard this. He hurriedly urged his body to rush over, but he was a cultivator of the human tribe. How could he resist the light pillar of the immortal world? It was impossible for him to get within 100 miles of the light pillar. "Senior, Senior, Xiao Hua said loudly, what is the holy lotus seed? Maybe I have it here. Unfortunately, Xiao Hua's words still couldn't break through the light pillar. Suji and Fairy Xing Yu couldn't hear him at all. Fairy Xing Yu came to her senses and nodded. That's right. You're right. I'll hurry back to the immortal world. Just you wait, Suji. I'll definitely find the holy lotus seed of the Buddha kingdom for you. I'll risk my life for it. With that, Fairy Xing Yu hugged Suji and kissed him fiercely on the lips. Then, she reluctantly let go of him and urged her body to fly toward the top of the light pillar. The light pillar, which had shrouded an area of tens of thousands of miles, became narrower as Fairy Xing Yu flew higher. The crack above her head actually shrank at an accelerated rate. Suji's silhouette could no longer stay in the silver light. When he was about to fly out, his whole body suddenly expanded. Boom! An armor flew out of the silver light and landed on the silver light. Amidst the vibrating sound, the 10,000-foot figure slowly shrank again. However, Xiao Hua could see clearly that on Suji's shrunken silver body, layers of grayish-black light fell and turned into nothingness. Wisps of faint fishy smell also drifted over from afar and rushed into Xiao Hua's mouth and nose. Even Suji's immortal spiritual pressure felt weak when it landed on Xiao Hua's body. It was far less powerful than before. What's going on? Xiao Hua was a little surprised and looked at Suji in a daze. However, at this time, Suji didn't pay attention to Xiao Hua. Instead, he looked up at the gradually shrinking and disappearing light pillar with a focused expression. Xiao Hua looked at this unyielding man and didn't dare to ask. He just quietly accompanied Fairy Xing Yu and watched her return to the immortal world. P.S. Fellow cultivators who like this book, please come to the starting point to cast a monthly vote, a recommendation vote, a collection, and a reward. Thank you for all forms of support. You probably won't have the chance, nor will you be able to occupy another human body. You don't have much time left. If I return to the immortal world, how will I be able to see you again? Sigh. Suji said regretfully, in the end, I didn't harden my heart. Naturally, Fairy Xing Yu had noticed that Suji's immortal spirit body was different because she had kissed him on the lips. Therefore, she smiled and said, that's because I'm charming. Moreover, if it weren't for that kiss, wouldn't I have regretted it for the rest of my life? Suji, who had no psychological burden, was obviously more talkative. He said with a smile, now I'm the one who will regret it for the rest of my life. Humph, I'm with you. What do you have to regret? Fairy Xing Yu rebuked. Why aren't you leaving? If you're any slower, I'll also regret it for the rest of my life. Leave? Where to? Suji was a little puzzled. Naturally, to other starry skies. Fairy Xing Yu replied, since there are cracks in the immortal realm in this starry sky, maybe other starry skies also have rare treasures from the immortal realm. If you and I are fated, we may be able to find something similar to the holy lotus seed. Suji thought for a moment and nodded. You're right. Although we know where those starry skies are, we rarely go to check them out. Maybe there will be some surprises waiting for us. The most important thing is, Fairy Xing Yu tightened her grip on Suji's hand and said, my happiness lies in these starry skies. At this point, Fairy Xing Yu looked at Xiao Hua and said, Xiao Hua, are you willing to help us? Of course. Xiao Hua nodded firmly. I'm honored to witness the love between two immortals. Let's go. Fairy Xing Yu and Suji urged their figures and flew toward the starry skies not far away. Xiao Hua followed the two immortals. The smell of blood drifted past his nose and mouth. Even if he closed his mouth and nose, he could still smell it. Xiao Hua felt a little sour in his heart. Even someone as strong as Suji, a law enforcer of the immortal realm, would have his third decay. Life and death were everywhere in this world. However, at the same time, he was extremely gratified. If he could smell the blood from so far away, what about Fairy Xing Yu? Suji's beloved was like this. Even if he died, his heart would not be broken. The starry skies next to them was still a starry skies maze. In the face of Xiao Hua's terrifying sense of direction in the void, even an immortal would have to admit defeat. Xiao Hua did not spend too much effort to break the starry skies maze. What appeared in front of Suji and Fairy Xingyu was an array that flickered with many rays of light. However, Suji and Fairy Xingyu did not hesitate. They each reached into Silverlight's chest and took out 2 cracked tiger talismans. These tiger talismans were even stranger. One was large and the other was small. Moreover, there was a token arrow piercing through the abdomen of the tiger talisman. When the 2 of them breathed out immortal chi, the 2 tiger talismans glowed with silver light and turned into the shape of a dragon and a tiger. When the 2 tiger talismans rushed into the array, the entire starry sky was strangely divided into 2 from the middle. What was beyond the starry sky made Xiaohua's jaw drop. It was a palace that looked like a hall. This palace was so big that it was as wide as heaven and earth. Xiaohua's divine thought could not see the end. Fairy Xingyu spread her divine thought and then raised her hand. A palm-sized key fell into her hand. "Let's go." Fairy Xingyu originally wanted to take the key, but when she looked at the empty palace, her interest waned. She said this and was about to throw the key away. Xiaohua hurriedly shouted, "Senior, leave this to me." "Well, take it, you little miser." Fairy Xingyu did not ask any more questions and casually threw the key to Xiaohua. Xiaohua caught the key. Before he could take a look, the surrounding starry skies surged out again like a tide and pushed them out. Then, Xiaohua followed Suji and Fairy Xingyu to 4 starry skies that sealed off their divine thoughts. Suji and Fairy Xingyu were not prepared and could not enter one of them, but they could enter the other 3 starry skies. The situation in the starry skies was different, and the items obtained were also different. One was a thumb-sized crystal-like object, another was a small halberd, and the last was a token. Although the 3 items had extraordinary origins and even Fairy Xingyu could not tell the reason, she was concerned about Suji at this moment. Everything in her eyes was like dung. Without waiting for Xiaohua to speak, she gave them all to him. Xiaohua also took them without saying anything and directly sent them into the space. As Xiaohua had expected, these items did not fall into the Shenhua continent. Instead, they fell into different spaces. The crystal-like object even fell into the spiritual realm. When they came out of the last starry sky, Fairy Xingyu casually pointed to a starry sky and said, "Let's go there." "Yes, Senior." Xiaohua responded and was about to fly up. However, Fairy Xingyu said indifferently, "There is no need to break the array here." Xiaohua was stunned. He had a bad feeling in his heart. Seeing Fairy Xingyu take Suji's hand and rush into the starry sky, Xiaohua slowly followed behind them. Sure enough, there was no array or door in the starry sky. There was only a sky full of stars, like eyes looking at Xiaohua with ridicule. Xiaohua sighed and thought to himself, "The Star Moon Palace is a mysterious ancient divine object. There are endless secrets in it. Even this resplendent starry sky has many secrets. There might be the holy lotus seed that Suji needs." However, powerful immortals like Suji and Fairy Xingyu could only find out so much after so many years. Sometimes, human strength is limited. This is indeed the case. Presumably, they have no more hope. Xiaohua did not dare to say more. He stood quietly in the starry sky. In the distance, the 2 silver figures were snuggling together. There was no longer the majesty of the supreme divine powers of the 3 continents. What was left was only sweetness and desolation. "No." After a few minutes, Fairy Xingyu, who was curled up in Suji's arms, suddenly raised her head and said stubbornly, "I can't give up like this. Suji, let's rush over the platform and go to the hall. The starry sky, there is a corner of the immortal realm. There might be some opportunities." "No need." Suji shook his head and said, "We have not been able to gather the required credentials for that forbidden area for tens of thousands of years. Even if we get there, we can't go in. No, if we don't go and take a look, I really can't accept it." Fairy Xingyu was equally determined. "All right then." Suji could not resist Fairy Xingyu. He turned to Xiaohua and said, "Xiaohua, after the platform is a place that we explored for the 2nd time. There are a lot of credentials there. We have not been able to gather them, so we never went there again. It is very dangerous after the platform. The extremely mysterious thunder I told you about before is behind the platform. This thunder is even more difficult to guard against than the forbidden array of the Ghost Plane. We still have some resistance, but none of the cultivators of the 3 continents can resist it. You don't have to go there. Stay here and meditate on the Starry Sky Maze. When the Star Moon Palace is closed, the power of the stars and the moon will naturally send you out of the Star Moon Palace. P.S. Fellow cultivators who like this book, please come to the starting point to vote, recommend, collect, and reward. Thank you for all your support. Swoosh! Just when the 3 of them were carefully flying towards the back of the platform, the sound of flowing sand was suddenly heard from the greenish-white far away. Suji and the others stopped and turned around to look. On the other side of the platform, nearly 20 great demons of the demon clan were flying close to the platform. Most of the 20 great demons were at the sun-devouring realm. Among them, there were actually 2 demon kings at the Nation realm. When the great demons saw Suji and Fairy Xingyu, they were all stunned. The immortal realm pressure from the power of the stars and moon was almost suffocating. Why are you all here? Xiao Hua flew up and asked with a frown. This is not a place where you can come. Greetings, senior. When the great demons saw Xiao Hua fly out, they seemed to understand something. In the face of a grand ascension stage human, they didn't dare to be negligent and bowed respectfully. Get up. Xiao Hua pointed to the resplendent sea of stars in the distance and said, that is the resplendent sea of stars. There is some strange extraterritorial star force that is extremely beneficial to demon cultivators like you. If possible, you all can go there to cultivate. Senior, Demon King Na Tian said bluntly, I feel that the star force is not helpful for us to break through, so we want to go to this mysterious thunder formation to try our luck. The cultivation of the demon clan is very different from that of the human clan. Senior, I'm afraid you don't understand. Haha, fine. Fairy Xingyu said with a smile, since you all want to go ahead. Yes, senior. The demon king responded. He looked around and flapped his wings slightly. The group of demons followed the demon king and carefully flew away from the side. Alas, Suji sighed. There are always people who don't believe what others say and think they are different from others. I'm afraid they will only wake up when they are on the verge of death. Senior, why do you sound like me? Xiao Hua touched his nose and said in a low voice, That's right. You're also the kind of person who won't give up until you hit the wall. Fairy Xingyu said bluntly. Then, she hit the nail on the head and said, You were lucky. Otherwise, you would have turned into ashes. Soon after, the 3 of them flew forward again. Although the platform looked very wide, when they really flew, Xiao Hua discovered that the space of the platform seemed to be like a valley. When they flew to either side, there would always be an inexplicable tilting force that subtly affected the direction of their flight. After a short while, they would fly back to the center of the platform, unable to go far. Therefore, although the 20 or so great demons didn't want to fly together with Suji and the others, after flying for a while, they were still in front of Suji and the others. Be careful. Suji hurriedly reminded them in a low voice when he saw the faint outline of the green and white area in front of them. The time it takes to drink a cup of tea is the most dangerous. If the thunder restriction is not triggered, we will be safe. Unfortunately, before Suji could finish his words, a rumbling sound came from high up in the sky. Be careful. Suji was shocked and hurriedly pulled Fairy Xingyu back. However, whether it was Suji or Fairy Xingyu, the silver light around them flickered rapidly, like a candle in the wind, flickering unsteadily. Suji and Fairy Xingyu could naturally react, but the great demons in front of them couldn't. As the thunder passed, the bodies of the 3 great demons flashed with starlight, and then they expanded sharply. Bang, bang, bang. Their bodies exploded, and the broken demonic beasts also disappeared into nothingness in the thunder. When they looked at Xiao Hua again, the sound of thunder was like the whole platform falling down and smashing straight into his mind. However, as soon as this violent impact fell into Xiao Hua's body, the Hongmeng immortal qi in his lower dantian was stimulated with a boom, covering the scattered nascent souls and more than 100 of them. Moreover, the truth of heaven and earth in the Hongmeng immortal qi also turned into waves that flowed rapidly in Xiao Hua's body. Not only that, But the crystal-like godhead hidden in Xiao Hua's sea of consciousness also inexplicably revealed itself. When the violent impact landed on Xiao Hua's body, it actually turned into a peculiar fluctuation that rushed into the scenery-like godhead. As the scenery-like godhead shone with a wrinkled luster, Xiao Hua actually heard cryptic and indescribable voices in his ears. Huh, this voice sounds like the magical power used by devouring heaven and the others on the primitive continent. Xiao Hua was stunned and hurriedly activated his secret technique. Sure enough, the voice sounded in Xiao Hua's mind again. Fa Wucheng Fa. Xiao Hua. Seeing the golden light flashing around Xiao Hua and him standing there motionless as if he was possessed, Su Ji became anxious. He raised his hand and grabbed, trying to pull Xiao Hua away. However, as soon as his big silver hand touched the golden light around Xiao Hua, it immediately collapsed. Huh. Su Ji was shocked because he could clearly feel that there was a power in Xiao Hua's golden light that was beyond his reach. It was this power that had defeated his big hand. However, when Su Ji's big silver hand collapsed, the sound of thunder had turned into a lingering sound and gradually dissipated. Let's go. Without waiting for Su Ji to ask more, Fairy Xingyu urged again. The two of them flashed and flew forward. However, they didn't dare to teleport because they had also encountered the law of time and knew that speed was limited here. Xiao Hua was a little regretful because he didn't finish listening to that sentence. When Su Ji and Fairy Xingyu flew past, Xiao Hua hurriedly rushed into the depths of the platform. To Xiao Hua's surprise, the group of great demons didn't show any fear after losing 3 of their great demons. They still accelerated their flying speed and rushed inside like Su Ji and the others. Seeing the light and shadow of a tower-like pavilion appear in the distance of the bluish-white platform, Su Ji hurriedly sent a voice transmission. Xiao Hua, when we reach that pavilion, we will be out of the range of the thunder restriction. We will be safe. Fairy Xingyu smiled bitterly and said, I'm afraid it's not that simple. Sure enough, before Fairy Xingyu could finish speaking, rumbling sounds could be heard. Rumble, rumble, rumble. Thunderclaps fell from the sky like drums. This thunderbolt was different from the previous one. As soon as it fell into Xiao Hua's ears, it turned into an indescribable wave. This wave rushed into Xiao Hua's body, internal organs, lower dantian, and other parts of his body, giving birth to all kinds of inexplicable law of space. Xiao Hua felt that his body was expanding like countless spaces, and he couldn't control them at all. However, when this wave fell into his lower dantian and rushed into the crystal-like godhead, it also triggered the truth of heaven and earth in the Hongming purple vapor and the divine power in the crystal-like godhead. Under this mysterious power, the countless new spaces in Xiao Hua's body expanded again and again. Then, they turned into words that fell into Xiao Hua's heart. If there is a law in the human world, then the law is untraceable. If there is a law in the immortal world, then the law is unsystematic. If there is a Tao, then the Tao cannot be named. This voice was obviously different from the previous one, but every word carried an indescribable mystery. It was as if every word was a world and every word was a thunderbolt. Whoosh! The silver light around Fairy Xingyu and Su Ji was torn apart. The two of them had no time to care about Xiao Hua now. They fled in a sorry state and looked at the group of great demons. Bang, bang, bang. Bang, bang, bang. Without any suspense, even the Demon King Na Tian turned into nothingness in this thunderbolt that contained the truth of heaven and earth and contained the law of space. P.S. Fellow Taoists who like this book, please subscribe to it at Qidian, vote for it, give it a recommendation vote, collect it, and reward it. Thank you for all forms of support. The number of chapters you want to read tonight depends on the votes of the fellow Taoists today. Chapter 45-54. If people have laws, then laws will be untraceable. If immortals have laws, then laws will be unsystematic. If gods have Tao, then Tao cannot be named. Although Xiao Hua could not understand, he understood that laws could not be passed on. Not everyone who could hear the laws could understand the laws. Those who were not fated to hear the laws would be punished by God even if they heard the laws. Xiao Hua still wanted to listen attentively, but after a burst of thunder, there was no more sound. Fairy Xingyu's tentative voice came again. Xiaohua, you're fine? Let's go. Xiaohua could not explain his strangeness, so he could only change the topic. Let's go to that pavilion first. Su Ji and Fairy Xingyu suppressed their astonishment and followed Xiaohua to the outline of the pavilion. Su Ji and Fairy Xingyu were very glad, but Xiaohua was disappointed. After flying over the platform, there was no more thunder. In front of them was the outline of half of the broken pavilion. After being killed by the mysterious thunder, the silver light around Su Ji began to turn gray and rusty, almost covering the whole light and shadow. Pieces of gray and silver light turned into fragments and fell, and the fishy smell now turned into the smell of decay. Going from here. Without waiting for Xiaohua to speak, Fairy Xingyu raised her hand and pointed. Her entire right hand left her body and landed on a part of the silhouette. The silver light made a sizzling sound and turned into a very complicated pattern of a palace door in the darkness of the huge silhouette. Puff! Fairy Xingyu spat out a mouthful of immortal spirit qi. The door of the palace with only a pattern opened, and a primitive aura fell from inside. Of course, the situation inside the palace could not be seen clearly from outside the door. However, when Xiaohua flew in with Su Ji and Fairy Xingyu, it was an eye-opener for him, because there was a huge starry sky above the palace. This starry sky was different from before. It was not densely covered with stars. Instead, there were 12 groups of stars that formed a strange star formation above the starry sky. Xiaohua could not understand these star formations. He asked in confusion, Senior, is this the star map of your immortal world? That's right. Fairy Xingyu nodded and said, there is a starry sky in the immortal world like this. Our Palace of Justice calls it the 12 Earthly Branches Star Array. Su Ji took out 7 strange tokens from his bosom and explained with a strange tone. In my hometown, there are 12 zodiac signs. They are Zishu, Choox, Inhu, Mao Rabbit, Qinlong, Sea Snake, Wu Ma, Wei Yang, Shin Monkey, Yu Rooster, Su Dog, and Hai Pig. They also saw the 12 earthly branches as the 12 commonly seen animals. Look, doesn't that star array look like a rat? Doesn't that star array look like a cow? As he spoke, Su Ji raised his hand and waved, causing 7 tokens to fly into the air. They were the rat head token, dragon head token, horse head token, sheep head token, monkey head token, chicken head token, and dog head token. Then, he explained in a desolate manner, after Xingyu and I saw the 12 earthly branches star array for the second time, we deliberately searched for these tokens in the 3 continents. However, with our limited strength, Xingyu and I were only able to find these 7 tokens. We couldn't find any of the other 5 tokens. So, although we know that this place may be related to the immortal realm, we can't do anything about it. Looking at the 7 tokens, Xiaohua smiled, and a string of tears of happiness couldn't help but flow down. He said in a low voice, Senior, if you can find all 12 tokens, then it'll be strange. Oh? Why? Su Ji was slightly stunned. Seeing the tears in the corners of Xiaohua's eyes, Fairy Xingyu suddenly understood and exclaimed, I understand. Those tokens are from the Dawn Rain continent. Yes, that's right. Xiaohua, you. Seeing that Fairy Xingyu had lost her composure, Xiaohua did not dare to delay any longer. He raised his hand and took out the tiger head token, the ox head token, and the pig head token, the snake head token, and the rabbit head token from the mysterious water palace in the Pure Land world. He also took out the tiger head token, the ox head token, and the pig head token, which he had obtained from the demonic beast storage ring on Sunset Island. How is this possible? Su Ji could not help but be stunned. Could it be that my divination skill is really... That's right. Xiaohua nodded vigorously. Senior, don't worry. There must be the holy lotus seed you need behind the star array of the 12 zodiac signs. But the passage to the immortal realm... Su Ji was puzzled. Su Ji, Fairy Xingyu said with a smile, as long as you are here, the immortal realm is everywhere. Your divination skill is correct. Good. Su Ji was also overjoyed. At this time, he no longer had the strength to activate the zodiac token. He responded and looked at Fairy Xingyu. Fairy Xingyu opened her mouth, and a mouthful of immortal chi fell on the rat head token. The rat head token suddenly expanded. Fairy Xingyu raised her hand and pointed at it. The token flew under a star array. When the token approached, all the stars on the star array emitted starlight and fell into the token. The starlight on the token shone brightly and turned into a lifelike rat that rushed into the star array. Boom! The starry sky shook and the star array tumbled. A moment later, a white jade box engraved with a rat pattern flew out of the star array. Fairy Xingyu hurriedly waved her hand, and the jade box fell into her hand. She carefully opened it and glanced at it. She could not help but feel a little disappointed and handed it to Suji. Suji glanced at it and frowned. He then handed it to Xiaohua. Xiaohua took it and saw that it was a strange object the size of a palm. It looked like a starfish, but there were some strange fine lines on the inside. Layers of indescribable waves were generated between these fine lines. Before Xiaohua could speak, Fairy Xingyu activated the bullhead token again. The second star array was opened, and there was another jade box inside. Fairy Xingyu looked at it and gave it to Suji, who handed it to Xiaohua. Xiaohua glanced at it and put it into the space like the first jade box. However, it was very strange. These two jade boxes had landed in different spaces, and neither of them was on Shenhua continent. In the time it took to smoke a cigarette, Fairy Xingyu opened all 11 star arrays. A jade box flew out from each star array, and each jade box was placed in a different space by Xiaohua. There were even some spaces that had yet to take shape. Finally, Fairy Xingyu stood in front of the last star array and looked at the last dog head token hesitantly. Suji smiled and said, "The previous jade boxes were either the Buddhist Kingdom's medicine, the Heavenly Court's gold core, or the Demon League Star Scorch. This last one should be the immortal elixir of our Dao sect, right?" "It should be the immortal elixir of Dao sect," Fairy Xingyu said with certainty. "But it might not be the holy lotus seed of Dao sect." "Senior." Xiaohua was confused when he heard Fairy Xingyu's words. He hurriedly asked, "Didn't you say that the holy lotus seed was an item of the Buddhist kingdom? How did it become an immortal elixir of our Dao sect?" "Who told you that the holy lotus seed was an item of the Buddhist kingdom?" Fairy Xingyu glared at Xiaohua and said, "The holy lotus seed is an immortal elixir refined by a Dao sect pharmacist in the immortal world with the help of the lotus seeds from the lotus pond in the Buddhist kingdom." Unfortunately, Fairy Xingyu's eyes were blocked by the silver light, so Xiaohua could not see it. Xiaohua was helpless when he heard this. After all, Suji had only told him half of the story. "Open it," Suji said faintly. "The jade boxes are already behind the starry sky. It doesn't matter if it's the holy lotus seed or not. It's a fact." "Okay." Just like before, Fairy Xingyu sent the dog head token into the star array. Sure enough, another jade box flew out. This time, after Fairy Xingyu took it, she did not dare to open it. It flew to Suji and carefully handed it over. However, she did not let go of it. At this moment, a faint golden light appeared above the starry sky, and a strange aura faintly discernible descended. However, just as this aura appeared, the golden light disappeared. Xiaohua only had time to raise his head to take a look before the aura also disappeared. However, Xiaohua did not have time to pay attention to the aura at this time. He also looked at Suji and Fairy Xingyu. Suji looked at Fairy Xingyu. The two of them each took one side of the jade box and gently opened the jade box. Looking at the contents of the jade box, the two of them did not speak for a long time. Xiaohua could not see their expressions and was a little anxious. However, he also had a bad feeling in his heart. If the holy lotus seed was inside the jade box, how could Fairy Xingyu let Suji look at it like this? She would have let him take it long ago. Sob, sob. Fairy Xingyu seemed to have been too hopeful. Now that she was disappointed, she actually sobbed softly. Suji sighed slightly and raised his hand to pull Fairy Xingyu into his arms. He wanted to say something, but he couldn't. He only patted Fairy Xingyu's back. After a while, Fairy Xingyu raised her head from Suji's arms and said, "Suji, is our luck really that bad? After so many years of searching for the Star Moon Palace, it was all in vain in the end? With you, how could it be all in vain?" Suji replied. Alas. Fairy Xingyu sighed. Looking at the jade box in Suji's hand, she said, this clear feather elixir has benefited Xiaohua again. Haha, Xiaohua's luck is better than ours. Suji said and handed the jade box to Xiaohua. Xiaohua, this is the clear feather elixir used by the mortal fairies in the immortal world. Your strength is now only at the middle of the 9th level of origin power. If you want to cultivate to the upper level, it will take at most 50,000 years, at least 10,000 years. Of course, we can't rule out that you have other opportunities to shorten this time. As for this clear feather elixir, if your cultivation is stable and your realm surpasses your strength, you can take it. It will probably only take a few years for you to reach the highest realm in the 3 continents. Remember, this elixir contains the immortal spiritual chi of the immortal world. If you haven't reached the late stage of the Mahayana realm, don't take it. Oh, in addition, among the things I gave you, there is a coarse grass talisman. I refined it myself to suppress your strength. If it is not appropriate for you to take this elixir, you can use the coarse grass talisman to suppress it. P.S. Fellow cultivators who like this book, please come to the Chidian point to vote, recommend, collect, and reward. Thank you for all your support. Chapter 45-55. Yes, thank you, Senior. Xiaohua took the jade box and glanced at it. He was stunned for a moment before he casually stored it in his space. Sure enough, the location of the jade box was the same as the gold core that Xiaohua had obtained earlier. In addition, the things I obtained earlier were also items from the Buddhist Kingdom and the Demon League. They have similar effects as the clear feather pill. There are records of these in Xingyue's moon-embracing palace. You'll know after you take a look. Suji added, in the future, I hope you can help me take care of Xingyue. Suji? Hearing Suji's words, Fairy Xingyue was displeased. She interrupted Suji and was about to speak. Xiaohua hurriedly asked Senior, the holy lotus seed. Shut up first. Fairy Xingyue said, wait for me to finish. How could Xiaohua wait for Fairy Xingyue to finish speaking? He waved his hand and took out the mysterious gold core he had obtained in the stacked jade legacy realm. He said, Senior, take a look and see if this thing is useful. Seeing the mysterious golden pill fall into the starry sky, it immediately turned into a flame that was dozens of feet wide. On the surface of the flame, tens of thousands of tiny vortexes rapidly expanded, each becoming the size of a thumb. Moreover, these vortexes produced a powerful suction force. Strands of needle-like power of the stars and moon were sucked into these vortexes. The suction force of this pill was so strong that it was as if a giant hand had grabbed the space within 100 feet, causing it to distort intensely. Within the distorted space, mysterious runes flew out from the vortexes. These runes slowly flowed in the flame's threads, and their trajectories looked mysterious. Holy lotus seed? Fairy Xingyue screamed as if she had seen a ghost. Her voice was like thunder, shaking the entire starry sky. Fairy Xingyue's silver figure broke free from the control of the star veil and rushed out hundreds of feet in an instant. You, Xiaohua. Even someone as calm as Suji could not hide his excitement. He stuttered and asked, this holy lotus seed, where did you get it? Fairy Xingyu, who had regained her senses, immediately emitted a silver light that soared into the sky. She recklessly shrouded the area within 1,000 feet of the holy lotus seed. She believed that if there were any changes at this time, even if Xiaohua wanted to touch the holy lotus seed, Fairy Xingyu would mercilessly deliver a fatal blow. Suji, Fairy Xingyu shouted. Who cares where it came from? Take it quickly. Senior. Xiaohua knew that Suji was a person of noble character. He definitely wouldn't eat food that was given to him for free. He bowed and said, Senior, please be at ease. This pill was obtained by Junior from the Dragon Island's training space. Its origin is clean. This is also this Junior's sincere filial piety towards you. Good child, good child, good child. Suji said good a few times, and the silver brilliance around him, which was mostly grayish-black, also soared into the sky. A fishy smell immediately filled the entire starry sky. As Suji's body expanded to 3,000 meters in size, layers of scattered light fragments rolled down from his body like waves. Wherever these light fragments landed, all things withered, and even space turned gray and collapsed. When Suji's figure landed, Xiaohua saw that the silver light covering his head had emerged from the grayish-black color. Although the silver light was still shining, wisps of grayish-black color seeped into his head as if they were poisoned. The rust spots that had previously covered the immortal mark were now connected, like a strange beast that wanted to devour the immortal mark. Suji opened his mouth, and a mouthful of immortal spiritual qi landed on the sacred lotus seed that had turned into flames. Woo! With a sound, half of the flames were extinguished. The runes in the flames suddenly rushed out from the immortal spiritual qi and entangled with the flames. Seeing this, Suji spat out another mouthful of immortal spiritual qi. Huff! This time, the flames were even weaker, and the runes emitted a silver light. Buzz! The space where the sacred lotus seed was located began to vibrate, and a light shadow shaped like a lotus seed emerged from the silver light. Suji didn't dare to be negligent. He formed a series of seals with his silver-gray hands, and several immortal techniques turned into thunderbolts and landed on the sacred lotus seed. Ao ao ao. In the distorted space near the sacred lotus seed, the wails of gods and ghosts were suddenly heard. Wisps of pitch-black devil qi mixed with holy Buddhist light emerged from the space and frantically poured into the sacred lotus seed's flames. Sizzle! The flames were immediately extinguished, and it turned back into the stardust-like pill that Xiaohua had seen in the Dragon Domain's mezzanine. Huff! Suji opened his mouth, and a silver light fell. It was precisely the sacred lotus seed. When the sacred lotus seed entered Suji's mouth, an explosion sounded like a fire rune exploding. The extinguished flames reappeared on Suji's head, enveloping the rusty immortal mark and the grayish-black silver light on his head. Ao ao ao. In the flames, a devilish sound was heard, and devils bared their fangs and brandished their claws as they danced with the sound. Namo Amitabha Buddha, Namo Amitabha Buddha. Along with the devilish sound, there were Buddhist chants. Bursts of Sanskrit chants that sounded like the sounds of nature came from the void, following which heavenly flowers fell from Suji's head, sprinkling into the grayish-black silver light. Wherever the heavenly flowers passed, the grayish-black color was washed away, and the fragrance of the heavenly flowers diluted the stench within the silver light. Excellent! Seeing this, Xiaohua couldn't help but smile. Rumble, rumble. The flames burned, and the rumbling sounds were endless. The same went for the Buddhist chants, and the devilish chants were unyielding. Within the flames, countless lightning bolts danced and shot down like flying swords. Rather than saying that Suji was consuming the sacred lotus seed, it was better to say that it was a battle between Buddha and Demon Immortal. However, after the time it took to brew a cup of tea, the lights and shadows continued to flicker, and the rumbling sounds continued. However, the flames were still on Suji's head and did not spread down. On Suji's body, the grayish-black color was still deepening, and fragments of light continued to fall. Although Xiaohua didn't understand, he could clearly see that Suji's body was becoming fainter and fainter. Damn it! Xiaohua suddenly understood something, and cursed inwardly, "This is the three continents. Although it's in Star Moon Palace, without sufficient immortal qi, the sacred lotus seed can't be used to its full potential. Moreover, Suji has been injured for so many years. Without the support of immortal qi, the sacred lotus seed won't be able to heal his injuries. If Suji's injuries aren't good, the immortal's third decay won't be able to stop it." Since Xiaohua thought of it, Fairy Xingyu naturally thought of it as well. High in the sky, there was a clear clang. An extremely bright silver light flashed between Fairy Xingyu's eyebrows. This silver light was like a bright star, illuminating the entire starry sky. Woo! The silver light was like a star, flying out from between Fairy Xingyu's eyebrows and crashing down on Suji. As the silver star rushed out, Fairy Xingyu's silver body suddenly became much fainter. As the silver star fell, the space rumbled, and layers of spatial ripples rippled in the starry sky. Boom! A moment later, the silver star fell into the flames, making a loud noise. The intensity of the flames suddenly increased. In particular, the silver light swords in the flames shot out in all directions like a sword net, enveloping the space within a radius of 3,000 feet. Under the sword net, more than half of the grayish-black color was destroyed. Through the flames, Xiao Hua could already see that the grayish-black spots in the immortal mark had been burned and broken. However, these spots were still struggling tenaciously in the demonic qi and howling, as if they were going to fight back. Senior, Xiao Hua laughed heartily and put his palms together. I'm here to help you. As he spoke, golden light burst out from Xiao Hua's body, and his figure slowly grew. When he was more than 1,000 feet tall, Xiao Hua chanted again, Namo Maitreya Buddha, by my command I. As Xiao Hua used the seventh divine ability of the Buddhist sect's 9-syllable Sanskrit incantation, the Buddha's aura in the nearby void shone brightly. This Buddha's aura condensed into the shape of water waves, surging from all directions and pouring into the flames. Moreover, in the Buddhist light, Xiao Hua secretly ordered the demon Venerable Shi to separate a wisp of demonic scents, which turned into a devil and flew in. ZZZ. The 9 syllables mantra Lai was really a Buddhist purification. Xiao Hua used the Buddhist power of the world-honored Buddha Maitreya to purify it. The water-like Buddhist light had already destroyed most of the demonic qi in the rust spots. The devils that were attracted by the divine lotus seed were scared away by the demon Venerable Shi's demonic sense, and those who were slow to react were devoured by the demon Venerable Shi. Seeing the grayish-black spots shrinking rapidly, Su Ji looked up to the sky and roared. Roar! His roar shook the whole starry sky formation. Boom! 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 Following 3 loud roars, 3 silver light beams shot up from Su Ji's immortal mark, piercing into the starry sky like light swords. Then, the space where the 3 light beams landed twisted and began to collapse rapidly. As the space collapsed, strands of silver light beams shot out from the space fragments, and a strong immortal spiritual qi gushed out from the fragments. Immortal spiritual qi? Fairy Xingyu was stunned. She hurriedly released her extended thought and cried out in joy, Suji, this is the immortal realm crack from before. How did it move here? As Fairy Xingyu spoke, the space fragments collapsed completely. A silver light beam fell and shone on Suji. Buzz! The strong immortal spiritual qi poured into the light beam like the Milky Way, and an obvious vortex appeared above Suji's head. As the immortal spiritual qi poured in, the silver light shone brightly and the wind blew violently. The immortal mark was as bright as the sun. Although Xiao Hua could not see the spots in the silver light clearly, he could see the flames spreading rapidly below Suji's body. Wherever the flames went, the grayish-black spots were immediately burned away. The extremely thin silver light was also visible to the naked eye. Xiao Hua was relieved. He withdrew his Buddhist divine sense, but did not withdraw his Dharma body. He stood by the side with a smile. P.S. Fellow Taoists who like this book, please come to Qidian to vote, recommend, collect, and reward. Thank you for all your support. Chapter 45-56. The Saint Lotus Seed was indeed the Saint Lotus Seed. In the time it took to drink a cup of tea, the flames had already reached the bottom of Suji's feet. As the flames passed, a transparent, sparkling, and radiant silver shell appeared in front of Xiao Hua. The threatening aura of the shell was unobstructed as it tumbled in the air. The golden light around Xiao Hua was unable to resist this aura and unconsciously retreated. He was already more than 100 miles away, and under the silver light, Xiao Hua's figure was still moving further away. Boom! The flame fell under Suji's feet, turned into a lotus seed, and once again swirled towards Suji's head. In just a few breaths' time, the lotus seed flame had reached Suji's immortal mark. Swoosh! All the aura and brilliance of the flame converged into the immortal mark. Boom! Another ball of aura rushed out from the immortal mark and fell into the lotus seed flame. Boom! A stream of light appeared on Suji's immortal mark again. It was obviously different from before. The moment the stream of light disappeared, The light pillar that seemed to pierce through heaven and earth slowly shrank. The crack in the starry sky began to slowly close. Suji, seeing this, Fairy Xingyu hurriedly rushed toward the light pillar. She urged, "Quick, this is our last chance to return to the immortal realm." "Okay," Suji replied. He raised his hand and made a grabbing motion. Clang! The lotus flames floating above his head condensed together and turned into a silver lotus seed. Suji moved his body into the silver light pillar. He looked up at Xiaohua and said in a thunderous voice, "Xiaohua, my divination skills are not wrong after all. You are indeed my savior when I return to the immortal realm. To tell you the truth, when I did the divination back then, I did not believe the result. If not for the holy lotus seed, I would not have returned to the immortal realm, and the holy lotus seed could not exist in the lower realm. At that time, I even thought that you could only help Xingyue, but I really did not expect that not only did you lead us through the starry sky maze and help us open the starry sky gate, but you also brought us the 5 zodiac tokens and the holy lotus seed. This Saint Lotus seed not only saved my life, it also allowed me to step into the light immortal realm. Xiaohua, no words can express my gratitude for your great kindness. Whatever you say now is meaningless. Wait until you ascend to the immortal world, then we'll drink and chat merrily." On Suji's head, Fairy Xingyu was also very happy. She shouted, "Suji, congratulations on entering the light immortal realm." As she spoke, Fairy Xingyu looked at Xiaohua and said with a smile, "Xiaohua, thank you. When you fly to the celestial world, I will also pour wine for you and Suji." At this point, Fairy Xingyu actually transmitted her voice again. "Oh, by the way, there seems to be some things in the Moon Embracing Palace that are useful for your return to the Dawn Rain continent. Of course, whether or not you can find it is not something I can know." "What's the point of pouring wine?" Xiaohua clapped his hands and said, "You need to get drunk?" Hee. Fairy Xingyu covered her mouth and laughed quietly. Seeing that the two of them had flown to the edge of the crack, Suji raised his hand, and the lotus seed, condensed from flames, turned into a stream of light and landed in front of Xiaohua. Suji transmitted his voice, "Xiaohua, this is transformed from my immortal mark. It contains my cultivation experience and imprint of my immortal mark. This is originally an item from the immortal world. I'll lend it to you temporarily to comprehend. It will be of great help to you when you ascend to the immortal world in the future. Remember, after you ascend to the immortal world, you must return it to me." Haha. Xiaohua saw that Suji rarely showed favoritism outside the law and even spoke vaguely. He stretched out his hand to receive the lotus seed and said, "Junior thanks Senior for your generous gift. I wish Senior's love is stronger than gold. I wish you 100 years of blissful marriage and a son soon." Boom. Following Xiaohua's congratulatory words, Suji's immortal body shook twice and fled into the crack of the immortal world in a panic. The crack of the immortal world closed with a loud bang. The entire starry sky shook a few times and then returned to normal. Holy lotus seed. Holy lotus seed. Xiaohua was really excited. The sense of accomplishment from helping someone, especially an immortal, was much stronger than what he obtained himself. Moreover, to be able to help someone who had helped him so much, not only for karma, but also for the beauty of the world, Xiaohua felt that it was worth it. He tossed the lotus seed up and down and laughed inwardly. I really didn't expect that the ancient golden core in the void of the dragon domain would have such an effect. This karma was already formed on the Dragon Island. Then, he looked at the lotus seed again. Where his gaze fell, endless lightning flashed and countless clouds lingered inside. It looked indescribably mysterious. However, Xiaohua laughed again. I've already obtained the innate purple qi. There are countless mysteries of heaven and earth in it. Why would I need this item condensed from the immortal mark? However, if I don't accept it, how can Suji be at ease? Moreover, Suji's experience in this lotus seed is even more important. In the future, when I encounter a bottleneck, I will inevitably need it. Fine. This item will be my Fortune Gate's cornerstone treasure. With that, Xiaohua sent the lotus seed into the Shenhua continent. Strangely enough, wherever the lotus seed landed, The immortal slaying stage fragment would release lightning, attracting the lotus seed to the side. Wherever the lightning struck, the lotus seed would release boundless clouds that shrouded the immortal slaying stage. Following that, strands of cloud slowly descended from the sky above the Shenhua continent, shrouding the entire Shenhua continent. Each strand of cloud contained the aura of immortal marks. Any Fortune Gate disciple on the Shenhua continent who was fated to obtain these strands of cloud would open a door to the heavens. In the future, these disciples' futures would be immeasurable. After putting away the lotus seed, Xiao Hua stretched lazily and muttered to himself, "Since entering the Star Moon Palace, I can be considered to have experienced life and death. Now, he could finally take a break. My trip to the Star Moon Palace is over." Thinking about it, this Xiao has also obtained quite a lot. Not to mention the clear feather pill that Senior Su gave to this Xiao. Even the other 11 strange things are all useful. This Xiao will find a place to eat this clear feather pill first. His granny, even the Grand Mist Ancestor came to the Star Moon Palace. I feel uneasy. If it weren't for Senior Su, I definitely wouldn't have let that guy in so easily. Humph. He dared to scheme against my Fortune Gate. How could I let him off so easily? Thinking of the place where he had taken the clear feather pill, Xiao Hua naturally thought of the starry sky. He raised his eyes and looked at the starry sky. The 12 star arrays where the 12 zodiac tokens had landed had already disappeared. Now, the entire starry sky was empty, and there were no stars flashing. Xiao Hua did not even think about it. He urged his body to descend. However, Xiao Hua was stunned on the spot after descending for 1,000 zhong. He stopped and raised his head to look at the sky. He rubbed his chin and thought to himself, the 12 zodiac tokens broke the 12 star arrays, and 12 jade boxes flew out from the star arrays. If the star arrays are completely broken, the starry sky will return to its original state, right? Not to mention, after the last jade box flew out, there was a mysterious aura in the space. Although that aura disappeared in a flash, it felt familiar to me. However, at that time, I was only focused on checking if there was a holy lotus seed inside the jade box. Moreover, the entire space was torn apart by the immortal world's crack, and that aura disappeared. Could it be that there is something strange in this space? Could it be that these 12 star arrays are just a cover? Thinking of this, Xiao Hua's eyes shone brightly. He rushed into the space and released his divine sense to explore inch by inch. Unfortunately, Xiao Hua didn't find anything even after looking for half an hour. Because the space was like the vault of heaven, unreachable and boundless, Xiao Hua's divine sense couldn't reach it. The 12 star arrays were empty, no different from the void. Could it be that I was wrong? Xiao Hua frowned. Or my feeling just now is wrong? A moment later, Xiao Hua opened his delusion breaker Dharma eye and scanned his surroundings. At this time, Xiao Hua's eyes were blurred. Bursts of stinging pain were transmitted to his mind from his eyes and into the mysterious dark clouds. Xiao Hua couldn't bear it. However, in his blurry eyes, except for the place where the golden light flashed and some fine time lines, the other places were completely the outline of a palace. There was nothing special. Seeing this, Xiao Hua didn't hesitate to teleport straight to the golden light. Unfortunately, this space was really strange. Teleportation seemed to be inferior to flying. After half an hour, Xiao Hua arrived at the place where the golden light flashed. Xiao Hua looked at his position and then looked around. A smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. The place where the golden light came from was a space covered by fine time lines. At this time, it was no different from the surrounding space. Xiao Hua also tried Yuan Shun, soul consciousness, Buddhist consciousness, divine sense, and even the clear eye technique, but he couldn't see anything strange. Moreover, this space was only a few dozen miles in size. It was almost a drop in the ocean in the entire seemingly boundless space. He didn't know if Fairy Xingyu had the Dharma Eye technique, but he believed that, other than Fairy Xingyu, among all the humans and demons who could enter the Star Moon Palace, he was probably the only one who could find the place where the golden light came from. Here, Xiao Hua opened his Dharma Eye again. Through the fine timelines, the other space that overlapped with this space was also vaguely revealed. The interior of the space was pitch black, and nothing could be seen clearly. However, there seemed to be a huge object covering the entire space. Damn it! What is it? Xiao Hua closed his Dharma eye and rolled his eyes. What kind of aura makes me feel a sense of familiarity? Now that the 12 zodiac tokens are gone, how can this aura leak out? This is the law of time. It's not something I can break. P.S. Fellow cultivators who like this book, please come to the starting point to vote. Vote for recommendation, collect, and reward. Thank you for all your support. Chapter 45-57. Thinking of this, Xiao Hua showed a trace of hesitation. After a while, he narrowed his eyes and thought to himself, looks like I can only try this divine ability. I just don't know if this divine ability is effective against the law of time. After waiting for the time it takes for an incense stick to burn, Xiao Hua once again opened his delusion breaker Dharma eye. Silver light flashed within the Dharma eye, and a beam of silver light shot out from the Dharma eye and fell into the void. Open! Xiao Hua roared angrily. The void started to spin under the light beam, forming a whirlpool several feet in size. Then, spatial cracks appeared in the whirlpool. Unfortunately, outside the spatial cracks, inexplicable starlight appeared. Neither the golden light nor the aura appeared. Xiao Hua's plan to use the law of space to break the law of time was going to fail. Break? Xiao Hua roared again. His entire law eye, which seemed to be staking everything on a single throw, emitted an intense dark green brilliance. That silver beam of light also doubled in size in an instant, emitting a trembling sound. The void vortex below the beam of light suddenly deepened, and then a faint golden light flashed out with a schwa sound, followed by a wisp of aura rushing out from the vortex. However, the golden light and aura both flashed and disappeared. When the golden light appeared, the delusion breaker Dharma eye was in severe pain. Xiao Hua could no longer hold on and hurriedly closed his Dharma eye. A layer of black luster rapidly appeared between his eyebrows. Ah! Xiao Hua cried out involuntarily. The surprise in his voice far exceeded the pain of the Dharma eye. Isn't this the aura of the 10,000 extinguishing heavenly dipper? As he spoke, Xiao Hua raised his hand and took out the 10,000 extinguishing heavenly dipper from the space where Taoist Master Yuan was. Sure enough, when the 10,000 extinguishing heavenly dipper appeared, the aura rushed toward the void. Layers of space collapsed, but nothing else appeared after the space collapsed. I understand now. Surprised, Xiao Hua restrained his emotions and pondered. The law of time must be the fragment of the 10,000 extinguishing heavenly dipper. So, I can feel the familiar aura from a different space. But the fragment is in another space. How can I break through the shackles of time? Speaking of Xiao Hua's ability to break through the shackles of time, it was naturally the lightning evasion. Previously, Xiao Hua had already tried pushing his lightning evasion to its limits in the Beast Enclosure and Mount Fubo. However, he was still a hair's breadth away from breaking through the timelines, and this hair's breadth should be an intrinsic difference. How could Xiao Hua possibly break through it? Perhaps it wouldn't have worked before. A complacent smile appeared on Xiao Hua's face. With a wave of his hand, a jade box appeared in his hand. This Xiao's magic power doesn't seem to be enough to support the lightning escape to surpass the fine lines of time. However, this Xiao now has the clear feather pill. Senior Su had made it clear that consuming this item required one's cultivation realm and a firm Dao heart. When I was fighting with Bei Xian I had already fused all of my previous accumulations. Now that I lack time, this clear feather pill is naturally the best choice. And now, this Xiao wants to rely on magic power to activate the lightning escape technique to compete with the laws of time. Isn't this the same as using the medicinal effects of the clear feather pill? Wouldn't he be able to use the law of time to eliminate the hidden dangers of the clear feather pill? Haha, this Xiao is a genius. This is a way to kill two birds with one stone. Thinking of this, Xiao Hua took out the clear feather pill from the jade box and placed it in his mouth. He held the 10,000 extinguishing heavenly dipper in his right hand and activated his magic power. Suddenly, lightning appeared on the surface of his body. Xiao Hua's figure moved, charging straight into the void in front of him. Lightning flashed around Xiao Hua's body, illuminating the surrounding space. At the same time this lightning flashed, space-time resistance immediately appeared. It was as if a surging wave was surging from all directions, annihilating Xiao Hua's entire body. There was no difference from before. Soon, Xiao Hua's body began to slowly move. For layers of shadows appeared. Immediately after, Xiao Hua's body turned into 1,000 feet of lightning. Moreover, the lightning became illusory, twisted, and broke into dozens of pieces. At the same time, the rumbling sound of thunder was also elongated, gradually penetrating deep into the void. The lightning suddenly trembled. Within the lightning, Xiao Hua's body turned into 132 million illusory dots. These dots of light rapidly flew back and forth and gradually merged into the void. When only 30% of the illusory dots remained, Xiao Hua felt that his body was empty. All of the illusory dots began to tremble violently. Xiao Hua didn't hesitate to flip his tongue. The clear feather pill turned into spiritual liquid and fell into his body. Boom! The clear feather pill that fell into Xiao Hua's body was different from ordinary pills. Waves of incomparably powerful medicinal effects were born from the medicinal liquid. Like a surging tide, they rushed into every part of Xiao Hua's body. Xiao Hua didn't dare to be negligent. He hurriedly urged his cultivation method to refine the medicinal effects. The clear feather pill was really overbearing. Not only did the refined true essence contain immortal spiritual energy, but it also contained the mysteries of heaven and earth. This true essence entered Xiao Hua's meridians and pushed Xiao Hua's cultivation to the late stage of the Mahayana realm. On the other hand, it entered the scattered nascent soul, causing the scattered nascent soul to rapidly expand. Bursts of tiny purple lightning appeared in the void and tore the already extremely distorted void into pieces. Moreover, a powerful pressure was emitted from these lightning threads and spread in all directions. As Xiao Hua's cultivation increased, this pressure also rose steadily. Looking at the 30% of illusory dots that hadn't merged into the void, they shook and formed shadows. The shadows were very slow, but they were very stable. When the shadows formed 9 layers, the sound of wind whistling began to emerge from the shadows. The remaining illusory dots also began to gradually merge into the void. After a while, Xiao Hua suddenly felt that the void around him began to change. The more he urged the lightning escape technique, the slower his flying speed became. Everything around him also began to slow down. Xiao Hua felt happy in his heart. He understood that he was already close to breaking through the shackles of time. Therefore, he accelerated the refining of the clear feather pill's medicinal effects. At this time, Xiao Hua's starry sky nascent soul once again turned into a nebula. Strands of tiny lightning threads mixed with immortal spiritual energy flashed between these nebulas. The grand mist purple chi also had tiny cloud threads that slowly merged into the nebula. Unfortunately, Xiao Hua was just a cultivator of the mortal realm. He hadn't even fully grasped the laws of space, so how could he break through the shackles of time? In the end, seeing that the clear feather pill's medicinal effects had been refined, Xiao Hua still had half of the illusory dots that hadn't completely merged into the void. On that day, the void around Xiao Hua also didn't completely stop. Damn it! Xiao Hua felt the illusory dots shake again. His body was about to break free from the void. He couldn't help but curse. He knew that he was going to fail again today. At this time, the 10,000 extinguishing heavenly dipper in Xiao Hua's right hand suddenly trembled. It emitted an intense golden light. Where the golden light landed, the void began to turn transparent. In front of Xiao Hua's eyes, the originally impossible to see timelines suddenly appeared. These timelines contained endless profound meanings. Previously, when Xiao Hua was comprehending the fragments of time in the heavenly prison, he couldn't see these profound meanings. When the timelines appeared, Xiao Hua's surroundings became deathly silent. It was as if everything in the world had stopped. Even Xiao Hua himself seemed to be unable to move. In the instant that the world fell silent, the golden light of the 10,000 extinguishing celestial dipper rushed into the fine lines of time and landed in another space. At the place where the golden light disappeared, a fragment and a crystal that looked like a cloud flew through the fine lines of time and landed in the gap of the 10,000 extinguishing celestial dipper. The moment the fragment fell into the 10,000 extinguishing heavenly dipper, the golden light disappeared. The timelines instantly disappeared. At the same time, the still world moved again. The space that was moving slowly and Xiaohua's eyes appeared again. However, this slowness only lasted for a few breaths of time. The entire space shook rapidly. Then, Xiaohua's half of the illusory dots that had yet to merge into the void also trembled. All the small dots that had disappeared before appeared again. Xiaohua's entire body flashed like a wave of water, completely revealing himself in the air once again. Just like before, bean-sized beads of sweat suddenly appeared on Xiaohua's forehead. However, Xiaohua didn't have the time to wipe the sweat away. With a sweep of his mind, he immediately stored the 10,000 extinguishing heavenly dipper and the cloud-like crystal into his space. Then, he let out a long breath. He sat down cross-legged, his palms facing the sky, and began to meditate. Along with the activation of his cultivation method, thin threads of lightning appeared around Xiaohua's body. These threads of lightning transformed into millions of vortexes. At the same time, Xiaohua's starry sky scattered nascent soul also flew out from his lower dantian. His entire body was surrounded by primordial purple qi. The brilliance of the stars and the moon that filled the sky was like a waterfall. It rushed out of nowhere and crazily landed on the scattered nascent soul in his body. As Xiaohua's pressure slowly spread out, it made up for the deficiencies caused by the activation of the clear feather pill's medicinal power. The starry sky scattered nascent soul also gradually expanded. In the end, it was as if it was going to cover the entire starry sky. After an unknown amount of time, the surrounding void began to give birth to a faint will of heaven and earth. This will quickly filled the entire space and fell on Xiaohua's body like the water of the four seas. Xiaohua's figure moved slightly, and the starlight that filled the sky disappeared. It seemed that the incomparably huge, starry sky scattered nascent soul also quickly shrank and fell on top of Xiaohua's head. When Xiaohua opened his eyes, he saw a river of stars flashing between his eyes. At the same time, lightning also appeared. Xiaohua looked up with some surprise, as if he didn't understand the origin of this will of heaven and earth. Then, he closed his eyes again and checked his cultivation base. After a while, he opened his eyes and thought to himself, Senior Su's words are indeed true. This clear feather pill is worthy of being a medicinal pill of the immortal world. My cultivation base has already reached the late Mahayana realm, and my starry sky nascent soul has also reached the end of the ninth tribulation. Moreover, this clear feather pill's residual medicinal power has not been completely refined. After refining it, this Shao can cross the tribulation at any time. The clear feather pill is so powerful, presumably other things also have similar effects. Thinking about this, Xiaohua took out a few more jade boxes and carefully examined them. Inside these jade boxes, there were 3 colored clouds, 9 colored hills, flashing crystal dragons, strange colored bone flowers, and even a multicolored butterfly. Xiaohua looked at them with a smile. His mind entered the space and called out Taoist Witch, Celestial Being, Demon Sovereign Sure, and the others. Without waiting for Xiaohua to speak, Taoist Witch and the others cupped their hands and smiled. Congratulations, fellow Taoist, for reaching the peak of the 9th grade of Essence Force. P.S. Fellow Taoists who like this book, please come to the starting point to vote. Vote for recommendation, collect, reward, and thank all forms of support. Chapter 45-58. Xiaohua shook his head with a smile and said, What is there to be happy about? If not for the fragment of the myriad extinguishing heavenly dipper, I would not have taken the clear feather pill now. Taoist Wu nodded and said, You are right. Fellow Taoist, you are now at the late stage of Mahayana realm, and still have the medicinal strength of the clear feather pill in your body. Perhaps you will ascend to the immortal realm after leaving Star Moon Palace. But we have yet to return to Dawn Rain Continent, and there are still many things we need to do. How can we leave now? Reverend Yin looked at Xiaohua and said with a smile, Fellow Taoist, you are overthinking. Do you think ascending to the immortal realm is an easy thing? Among 10,000 cultivators who have cultivated to the peak of the 9th tier of Yuan energy, it is impossible for one to ascend to the immortal realm. Furthermore, the closer one is to the end, the more difficult it is to cultivate. Although fellow Taoist has already reached the late stage of tribulation transcendence, it will take at least 1,000 years for you to reach the consummation stage. Fiend quickly said, That's right. Big brother, it's the same as when you use the lightning escape technique. The first 70% of your physical body can merge with the void, but the later 30% is much slower. If you want to merge the last 5% into the void, who knows how long you'll have to wait. Xiaohua looked at his clones and said with a smile, Let's not talk about it anymore. In any case, I have made great progress in my overall strength, so we should not neglect it anymore. Then, he pointed at the jade box hovering in the air and said with a smile, This is a treasure I obtained together with the clear feather pill. If nothing goes wrong, it should be able to help you in your cultivation. Fellow Taoists, please take a look at it, as it is what you need. Reverend Yun gave it a look, then grabbed it with his dragon claw. It was the glittering crystal dragon, and he said, You don't have to look at it anymore. It must be I. The celestial frowned and looked at this and that. Finally, he grabbed the small 9-colored mountain with his big hand. He squinted his eyes and looked at it for a moment, then nodded and said, This is it. Although I don't know what it is, the aura in it is very familiar. I think after refining it, my overall strength will catch up with fellow Taoist. Taoist, which smiled faintly. Without any hesitation, he extended his arm and took the strange colored bone flower in his hand. Like Reverend Yun, there's no need for me to look at it any longer. This thing is definitely mine. It's just that I don't know how helpful it will be to I's cultivation after refining it. Big brother, Demon Venerable Sure was a little envious. He looked at the jade boxes on the left and said with a flattering face, This 3-colored cloud has the aura of noble spirit. It must belong to Wenchu. That starfish has the aura of the power of the moon and stars. It should belong to Feng Wu. As for the bamboo that condenses the long river and the colorful butterfly, I don't know who would use them. However, little brother knows that all of this is useless for little brother's cultivation. I wonder if big brother has anything that I need? What else do you want? The celestial put away the 9-colored mountain and shouted, You should refine that demonic array's demonic spirit properly. It's stronger than anything else. Yes. Demon Venerable Sure smiled and said, Little brother knows that I'm being greedy. However, since all of you have gained something, you should let little brother be happy, right? Haha. Xiaohua laughed. He waved his hand and took out another jade box. Don't worry. This palace's star array is very magical. There are all kinds of treasures from Buddhism, Taoist, Confucian, and Demon. How can there be no demonic array? This is for you. Demon Lord Sure received the jade box and opened it to take a look. Inside, there was a blood-red skull that looked like a crystal-clear crystal. Demon Lord Sure Bujua laughed and quickly kept the jade box. He bowed and said, Thank you, big brother. Little brother will devour this thing. I think I can take the last step. Damn it. The celestial rolled his eyes and said, Why do you want to take the last step? Could it be that you want to ascend to the immortal realm too? Hee. Demon Venerable Sure laughed and said, Big brother, you don't know. Little brother can also ascend. However, little brother is going to the upper realm devil swamp in the devil realm. Good boy, you can also ascend. The celestial was envious and said, If all of you ascend, where will I go? Don't worry, fellow Taoist. Taoist which smiled and said, When we take the last step, we will naturally know. Moreover, at the very least, we still have Shenhua continent. When the celestial heard that, he raised his hand and took out the 9-colored mountain and said, Fellow Taoist, you are right. Then I want to see where I will take the last step. With that, the celestial opened his mouth and was about to swallow the 9-colored mountain. When Xiaohua saw that, he hurriedly raised his hand and blocked the mountain. He smiled bitterly and said, Fellow Taoist, don't worry. This is not a good place to refine treasures. If not for the fragment of the great extinguishing heavenly dipper, I wouldn't have taken the clear feather pill here. It's not too late to refine it after we leave the Star Moon Palace and find a place to cultivate. That works too. When the celestial heard that, He kept the nine-colored mountain and said, "That's right. The cloud-like crystal chip with the fragment of the Great Extinguishing Heavenly Dipper seems to be the secret technique to refine the Great Extinguishing Heavenly Dipper. I want to study it." "Very good." Xiao Hua smiled and handed the crystal chip to the Celestial. "I'll leave it to you to study it." When the Celestial kept the crystal chip, Xiao Hua said, "Fellow Taoists, you don't have to go back first. When I was passing through the platform earlier, I heard strange thunder. There seemed to be some strange words in the thunder. The sound contained the power of laws, and ordinary cultivators couldn't withstand it. However, when I heard it, it also sounded in my heart. I seem to be able to understand it. Now that we have nothing to do, instead of waiting for the Star Moon Palace to close, why don't we listen to it and see what mysteries there are inside?" "Very good." The Celestial smiled and said, "As the saying goes, unity of will is an impregnable fortress. We will also help you to study it." "Unity of will is an impregnable fortress?" Taoist sorcerer smiled and asked, "This phrase doesn't seem to be appropriate here." "Haha, who cares if it's appropriate or not? I'll go listen to it first." Xiao Hua laughed. His figure flashed and landed at the place where he came from earlier. The Celestial and the others followed behind him. After exiting the palace door condensed from silver light, they saw the greenish-white platform again. It was also as dark and cold as usual, as if everything that happened in the pavilion had nothing to do with the outside world. Even if a crack was torn in the immortal world, and the two exiled immortals had returned to the immortal world, they couldn't raise a trace of light in this darkness. Xiao Hua and the others stood in front of the pavilion and looked around. There were also some light silhouettes in the shadows in the distance, but they couldn't see what they looked like clearly. A kind of heaviness and mystery came from afar. Xiao Hua and the others passed by the light silhouettes and flew towards the platform. They knew clearly that the light silhouettes weren't something they could approach casually. After flying to the platform, Xiao Hua and the others landed and waited quietly. Sure enough, in the time it took to brew a cup of tea, thunder rumbled from high up in the sky. Xiao Hua hurriedly looked at the Celestial, Taoist sorcerer, and the others. It wasn't out of Xiao Hua's expectations. Their bodies shone with golden, blood-red, or gray-white light. However, their bodies were the same as Xiao Hua's, showing no signs of exploding. Xiao Hua breathed a sigh of relief and listened with rapt attention. That voice appeared in Xiao Hua's heart again. However, this time was different from the previous times. The voice was abnormally blurry, and he couldn't hear what it was saying at all. Fellow Taoist." Just as Xiao Hua frowned, the Celestial's body trembled and he cried out in alarm. This seems to be a cultivation method. It's really suitable for this poor Taoist to cultivate." Xiao Hua's body also shook. He looked at the Celestial in disbelief and listened with rapt attention again. Unfortunately, no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't hear it clearly. He looked at the Celestial again and frowned as well. He couldn't help but walk toward the other direction of the platform. "Fellow Taoist," Xiao Hua reminded him, "that place is not somewhere you and I can go." Without waiting for Xiao Hua to finish speaking, the Celestial raised his hand, indicating for Xiao Hua to shut up. His figure stopped, turned around, and took a few steps forward. In the end, he stopped again and said to Xiao Hua, "Fellow Taoist, this poor Taoist can confirm that this voice is talking about a kind of cultivation method that this poor Taoist can cultivate. But I can't hear it clearly from here. You can only hear it when you go there." As he said that, the Celestial pointed at the outline of a light shadow outside the platform. "How is that possible?" Xiao Hua was puzzled. The thunder can only be heard on the platform, but it can't be heard after the platform. How can that light shadow be heard? "Why don't we go there and have a look?" Reverend Yun said with a smile. "If fellow Taoist feels unsafe, we won't leave the platform." "All right." Xiao Hua nodded helplessly. He understood the Celestial's feelings very well. After all, it was rare for him to come across a cultivation method he could cultivate. If it were him, he wouldn't want to give it up so easily. What he was worried about was that the Celestial might not be able to hear it clearly when they reached the edge of the platform. Sure enough, when they landed on the edge of the platform, not only did the thunder not become louder, it became softer and softer, and finally disappeared. Damn it! Celestial Bujua roared to the sky. Are you kidding me? As soon as the Celestial's voice died away, another thunder rumbled. However, this time, it was not the thunder that fell, but the same inexplicable sound. The voice rang in Xiaohua's mind. Xiaohua shuddered and stood there in a daze. Although the voice was vague, he could hear it clearly. The discussion about the cultivation method is about to begin. All divine sons are in position. The discussion about the cultivation method? Divine sons? Xiaohua came to his senses and hurriedly turned to look at the celestial, Taoist sorcerer, and Reverend Yun. Obviously, they had heard it too, and their faces were filled with disbelief. After all, the Xingyue palace mentioned by Fairy Xingyu was an ancient divine object. How could there be an ancient deity in it? But if these voices were just illusions, and were just one of the restrictive spells in the Xingyue palace, what was the use of these voices? P.S. Fellow Taoists who like this book, please come to Qidian to cast a monthly vote, a recommendation vote, a bookmark, or a tip. Thank you for all your support. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.